I think he is. I think if you look at it, obviously it's between him and Larmour at the moment. They're the two guys that can clearly play 15. Lowe is going to get game time. I don't know if he's going to be put in immediately into the setup, on the basis of him being qualified. I think sometimes that message isn't the one that players or coaches like getting across, that there's a new guy in a squad. He's got to earn the right to play internationally, and you can't just throw him in the first game and almost be thankful that you have him. I think in a team where the back three has looked good, and with Conway and Earls playing well, I think it'll be hard to not select those two guys. Depending on whether you're going to play Stockdale at fullback or Larmour at fullback. So it is now a nice position to be in, and Lowe will get game time. I just don't know if he'll get it immediately or if he'll get it in the games where you're picking your first 15. I think he has to earn that right to get into that first 15. And
how do you weigh up Larmour versus Stockdale?
I think at the moment, a lot will be judged on this weekend's performance from Larmour at 15 if he gets it. I have a sneaking suspicion that he might go with Rob Kearney at 15 this weekend, and Larmour on the wing. Obviously, with the injury to Dave Kearney, no Adam Byrne, no Fergus McFadden. I just think you go with experience. You might lose a little bit of cutting edge in counter-attack at 15. And I know Stuart Lancaster does like playing all-out attack, but there's a security to having someone like Rob Kearney at 15 when you have the ability to shift Larmour to the wing as well. It is about getting your best players out on the park. And if you play Larmour at 15, I don't know what winger you put on. You don't put on a Hugo Keenan. I don't think you put on a Cian Kelleher on the wing for a clutch semi-final game like this against Munster. I think you go with your best players and your most experienced players and those that have calm heads. And I think Rob Kearney at 15 might be the decision that they go with Larmour on the wing. So it'll be a different sort of performance for Larmour on the back of that. He'll obviously have less high balls to deal with, but everyone will be keeping a very keen eye if he does play there, and the box kicks from Conor Murray, whether Conway or whoever it might be he's marking, get the better of him, because it's an area of his game that definitely needs honing.
Yes. You might have a feel for this. What kind of input will Andy Farrell have when it comes to Stockdale playing at 15 or Larmour playing at 15? Like Irish coaches down the year, can they ring up provinces or go through the RFU and say, listen, can you give him some game time there? And how does it depend on who the provincial coach is?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it depends on the relationship with the national coach at the time, and it also depends on what the best fit for the province in that particular game is. It's easier to do that throughout the year rather than at the business end of the season, semi-finals and finals.
But the provinces do have autonomy. They can say, "Listen, sorry, it's not happening."
They do, and if it didn't fit Dan McFarlane's setup where he wanted to play Jacob Stockdale solely on the wing, that's his prerogative, and he's entitled to stick to that. Whereas I think a lot of these provincial coaches will think about wins with the national coach and favours being done, and obviously as well, if a coach has an idea that a player might fit well in a particular position, other coaches are open to suggestion with those things, and maybe they might have a point. You try them out once and it doesn't work, well, at least you've tried it once. But it's more difficult to do that in clutch games. But a player like Jacob Stockdale, he's going to rise to the occasion, be it on the wing or at 15. There's more responsibilities at 15, and now that he's a couple of years older, I think he's in that position to be able to take on more pressure. But for the most part, Dan McFarlane maybe will be thinking, I'll give him a go there. If it works out, terrific. I'll be seen to have done a solid for the international coach, and maybe I'll get a favour somewhere else down the line too.
So with the view to Leinster, Munster then at the weekend, Leinster 28, Ulster 10, we spoke very briefly just before coming on air. You wanted to make a point about the messages Leinster send the opposition, or they sent Ulster certainly in the first couple of minutes here.
Yeah, it's just the psychology of what Leinster do, and I think they're such a clever team. And be it Felipe Contepomi or Leo Cullen or Stuart Lancaster, or in fact the individuals that are playing in that Leinster setup, I just think the picture that they show to the opposition, but then so often they do something slightly different, even though they'll know the analysis that has been done on them will feel as though it's a setup for a particular play. And the loop play is a great example of it. You know, back when I was playing, it was the Brumbies play, and it used to be that 10, 12, 13 short and out the back to 10 looping around, or hit the 13 short and then a blind winger trailing. And so you could go through the guts, or you could go around players holding your depth as appropriate. What they've started doing now is they're going 9 to 12. They don't have the luxury anymore of having that extra pass, you know, to get through 3 passes before the clutch pass is triggered. They go 9, 12, 13 short, and then 10 out the back with the blind winger trailing. It's the same setup so often, but now we're starting to see the grubber kick used an awful lot. It was used last week, and again, it's all well and good, you know, talking about doing it, but then having the accuracy and the trail lines to be able to get through. I thought it was really clever early on. What it does too, the psychology of it is it gets the opposition questioning their defensive line speed. And then it allows them later on to actually go to the loop play or to the hit return play. So 9, 12, hit 13, back to 12, and then all of a sudden you're around the corner. So, you know, by nudging a ball within the first 2 minutes, straight away as a defensive 13, if I was Hume or if I was McCluskey, I'd be thinking, gosh, I wasn't expecting that. Now we'll be on our heels a little bit more, and that just gives you another second of time on the ball later on in the game. The fact that they were able to regather the ball and then score, you know, 6 or 7 phases later on through Ed Byrne was the icing on the cake. But I just think they really thought through their kicking game, and I wonder whether it's come as a result of the work they've done with the Crusaders, with Robertson, and identifying that kick to regather is a big component of the game. Now that there's a huge amount of the time, 14 bodies in the defensive line with 1 in the backfield.
It feels like England really made a point of, I don't want to say pioneering that, but certainly utilising that over the previous couple of years. They had so many lovely little kickers dotted around the pitch, and with line speed coming up and 14 spread across the pitch, there are very few options when it comes to running.
Yeah, well, you still have that option. I think, you know, because when we talk about 14-1, you can talk about what the responsibilities of what the fullback has to cover now. Teams are playing wingers high. It's to show that line speed, to not think about drifting, so you can get up in the opposition's faces. So there has to be space somewhere. And, you know, if you can set up a situation where you manipulate a defence, or you pull a fullback out and have a winger playing high and then nudge the ball through, then it's a foot race. And then it's down to the quality of the kicks. And England have obviously had Ford and Farrell, Ben Young's very capable of nudging those little grubber kicks through. And we know the bounce of a rugby ball can bounce any particular way. So at least your odds are stacked at a 50-50 favour when there's a foot rush. And, you know, it bounced badly for Johnny Sexton in Twickenham earlier on this year. And, you know, the aggressiveness of the chase as well from the likes of O'Loughlin and in taking out Fadez, and then Frawley actually being able to recoup the ball, and then all of a sudden they're hammering away at the line. These small moments just set up, you know, the doubt in Ulster's mind that, gosh, we thought we were going to have it good from the off, and now Leinster all of a sudden within 3 or 4 minutes are 7 points up.
Just one last point on Leinster then, and we'll bring in Munster Connacht. Kieran Frawley played at 12, which I think caught the eye. He's been working on that in training. He said you do have a lot more time. It's obviously more physical. He seemed to go quite well. I don't know what you thought. So talk to us about Frawley, and then Harry Byrne got about 20 minutes as well. Ross Byrne obviously started, and Johnny Sexton had his feet up. So these 3 behind Sexton.
Yeah, I haven't seen a huge amount of Frawley. Obviously, he plays a lot of the Pro 14 games when Johnny's away or being rested. And the problem is, is the 3rd, 4th choice now, where I'm not entirely sure. So maybe, you know, he's had a word, or, you know, the coaches have realised that we've got 3 pretty good standard number 10s in Sexton and the 2 Byrnes. Maybe we need to make him a second distributor in the 12 jersey. And he's done very well from his outing at the weekend. Obviously, he got man of the match, but the question marks would have been around his defensive game. He had a big lump coming at him in Stuart McCluskey. He didn't have it all his own way, but I think having a 10 playing in the 12 jersey gives you that second set of eyes of, having an ability to be able to get to the extremities a little bit better with the quality of their pass as well. You look at the passing game of Leinster from all of those 10s, all excellent passers, all on the money. And so it is a bit of an embarrassment of riches considering that, Harry Byrne, who looks incredibly talented, was only sitting on the bench the weekend. Three number 10s of that caliber playing in that 23, and that's not even including Johnny Sexton is something. So, I'm excited to see a little bit more of Frawley. I wonder, will he make 12 a little bit more of his own position? He's a bit like Noel Reid when he broke onto the scene. He came in as a number 10. And then he developed into a 12 that could play 10 as well. So maybe we'll see that of Frawley. With regard to Harry Byrne, I thought, he's a very, very confident young player. He brings a real aggressiveness to the way he plays 10. You look at the way lots of 10s take their ball off their number 9. Some take it static, some take it deep. He takes it accelerating onto the ball. He wants to sit down the defensive line by the aggressiveness with which he attacks it. And it's very hard for a defensive line to continue pressing when they see the number 10 hitting the ball hard, hitting it square, and then distributing as well to the outside channels, be it through his forward runners or out the back to one of his outside backs. He had a couple of loose kicks early on, Byrne, but then the crossfield kick to Penny for his try. And then his own try, the manner in which he aggressively took that short line. I just think it's a player that's oozing in confidence. I think we're going to see an awful lot more of him in the 2020-21 season.
Well, they'll all have to fight it out. Latest I heard, Johnny Sexton's going to play until he's 54 now. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? Johnny Sexton's going to go on for a while. And we have to consciously not be ageist. Just because he is 35 now, he is in incredible condition.
Yeah.
He looks in the shape of his life, and if he has an appetite for it still, that's the problem. A lot of players just run out of steam mentally by the time they get to 35. Some of it is that the new breed come in and there's no connection between the 20, 21-year-olds that are TikToking, in the dressing room, and, you're father of 3 heading home to change nappies. It's a very different dynamic.
Yes.
So that actually is where some players go, you know what, I don't know if this is for me anymore. You start losing all your friends. You're the oldest swinger in town. And the guys that you've hung out with for 12, 13 years, all of a sudden are going on to pastures new. So it's the mental switch as much as the physical sometimes. And as he said himself, he's never really called on his gas to be, his point of difference. I watched him when Luke McGrath made a break last week, and I tell you, he was as quick as I've seen him in a long time. So the expectation is just because he's 35, everyone wants to write him off. I think there's a couple of good years left in Johnny Sexton for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Brief tangent, to what extent was it mental for you when it came to stepping away as opposed to physical?
It was more physical for me. I did still love it, but it became mental because the physical really let me down, and that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I could still see it as well as quickly as ever, but I just couldn't react and couldn't do whatever about the different evolutions you go through over the course of your career. I knew the 21, 22-year-old acceleration and all that. I'd parked that and I'd gotten over not having an ability to do that by the time I was 30, but there's only so many processes of evolution that you can have, and I was evolving into not actually being able to deliver anything other than a playmaker. And even then, I just felt a bit susceptible in defence. I felt that faster, more agile players could get me, and as a result, it got into my head, and I couldn't get out of there quick enough in the final season.
Munster then had a 7-try win over Connacht, 49 points to 12. This is a strange game to try and analyse in any great depth for obvious reasons. There were 3 yellow and 2 red cards in the opening 40 minutes. Frank Murphy awarded 22 penalties in the first half alone. 13 v 13 at the end of the first half. Byrne and Amani were sin-binned. The 2 sending offs, briefly, Abraham Papalili, the tackle on Conor Murray, and Shane Delahunt with his forearm into CJ Standard. Both red cards, I presume we can briefly say.
Definitely red cards. Yeah. Papalili was quite lucky early on a contact with Conor Murray as well. He hit him a little bit of a high shot. It's lovely having an enforcer like that, but what he's going to have to learn very quickly is that he's got to control his collisions. You can't go in with brute force from 5 meters out trying to maim someone with the reality that someone could change direction at the last second and dip or change their body height, and your collision stays on course. You're going to clean their head off. And that's what happened with Conor Murray. He identified that it was a great opportunity for him to get a big hit. Murray thought there was a gap. And it took a while to actually get to the final angle. I think they got to the decision, Ollie Hodges and Frank Murphy, and 100% correct. But actually, it was right after they finished the decision, an angle came in where you could see direct contact with his jaw. And for me, that was a stone cold red card. And then the other one, on the letter of the law, leading with the arm, you catch someone by their in the neck or the head, it's a red card. Frank Murphy tried to see whether there was a yellow card possibility by talking about first impact at the sternum, but Ollie Hodges changed that, and he was right to as well. The contact was straight into his neck. That windpipe injury, I've seen players really struggle with that in the past, so we need to outlaw it, and for me, they got the two of them spot on. I actually think there could have been more yellow cards. I think when Connacht were down to 13, they could have had another man in the bin. I think Frank Murphy probably was a little bit lenient. If they didn't have two sendings off, there was definitely going to be a yellow card. And then, sometimes you start siding with a team and feeling a little, subconsciously feeling a bit sorry for them. And the two yellow cards that Munster got just before halftime, certainly the Byrne one seemed a little bit harsh. I don't know whether he was off his feet by the time he got the ball, but anyway, the game was over as a spectacle at that stage.
What can Munster take from an attacking perspective from this game? And what are you seeing from them generally? Post-lockdown, Larkham has had his chance now to kind of try and fine-tune things. De Jolande's had another game to settle in. Like, if we're listing a problem of Munster's over the last number of years, it's that scoring tries is that bit too much work for them and takes that bit too much out of them. Any signs of rejuvenation and extra wrinkles in their play?
Well, the players that we talked about already, they've got two excellent finishers in Earls and Conway, in back at the height of their form, back to the form of last year, and so when you have that, you just have to create opportunities for them. And I think, certainly Conway's first try against Leinster, the manner in which they use the brute force of De Jolande and Farrell and Stander and their big ball carriers, that's what they've got to do. It's all about creation of quick ruck ball. No defensive system in the world. Leinster have a great defensive system, but they get narrow when the opposition keeps on going the same way. And Munster, we call it a cog team, keep on going. Munster are at their best when they don't try and get too clever, when they just play brute force, where they get those big ball carriers over the advantage line, and then they have the quality of pass from the likes of JJ Hannon and the finishing capabilities of Earls and Conway. That's what they're going to do best.
And have they struggled against the bigger teams in Europe, Brian? Is that where they've come up short, when they haven't been able to?
Yeah, they have. But you talk about, against Saracens and against Racing, it tends to be. And that's why they brought in Snyman. And that's why, they felt that, you look at their front row, are there any real monsters, Kilcoyne aside, is there anyone that's, really at a high international level in the front row? The reality is no. I thought Scannell was going to be an international caliber hooker. Yes, he's gotten a few test matches, but he probably hasn't hit the expectation levels of a couple of seasons ago. And against the best European teams, you got to play international caliber sides and international caliber packs. And it just felt as though that they've come off second best to them. Yes, they're a team that can get out of their group stage. Yes, they can win, the occasional quarter final now, but it's a different team that you meet in semi-finals and finals, and they've come unstuck. And that's why the news about Snyman is really disappointing, because was he one of the missing links within that setup to be able to let them enhance their game? He's an offloader, he's a ball carrier, he's a footballer. I think he's the perfect player to fit into that Munster team to get them to the next level. But it's great to see Tommy Byrne back and being a nuisance as we know and love from him. And maybe under Andy Farrell, he'll see a little bit more international time if he can keep up those standards that he set at the weekend.
So if Munster fans are looking for, the case that they can cause Leinster serious bother on Friday night, Leo Cullen talked about their line-out work last week as their main, their best source of access to the game was how he put it. So that was good, and that was obviously even without Snyman when he went off injured. And also their work at the breakdown has been much talked about as well. So, they're kind of two areas where they can really put it up to Leinster.
Jan van Graan's right. They need a huge amount to go right against Leinster. There is a gulf between the teams at the moment. I think the bookies have it at eight points. I like Munster at those odds. I think it'll be a tight game again. But the reality is, you look at player for player, I do think, and the cohesive unit that Leinster are at the moment, Munster are going to be underdogs, and rightly so. But what they've done at the breakdown in the last 2 weeks will absolutely cause headaches for Leinster. You look at what the stats that CJ Stander has picked off four turnovers in the defeat in the loss to Leinster a couple of weekend. Killoe, Peter O'Mahony. I even saw Conor Murray in there a couple of times that he felt hard done by not getting one or two steals. So it is clearly something that they've identified. And again, it comes down to every team in the world looks half decent when they've got fast ruck ball. Slow it down, set the defensive line, and give players an opportunity to get back on their feet and get line speed. It's a simple knock-on effect of slowing the ruck down to them being set to deal with the next phase. So, yeah, I think that's somewhere where Leinster have to be clinical, and along with their line out. Obviously, they were disappointing in the line out in the game last week. Peter O'Mahony again, pilfered ball. His timing looks as good as ever, and even an ability to be able to read Leinster's line out. So I think that's where the likes of Devin Toner, if he starts, will be very important to Leinster's first phase possession, because you deny them that, you deny them the ball or the quality possession, no team can play well just off broken phase. No,
and like we're talking here is that, so there's a gulf of as you said, and Munster, what will they come up with? I mean, the reality is they've a 5-day turnaround. Johan van Graan said we've about 60 minutes, proper training on Tuesday, and that's kind of it. Not so much they'll be able to pull out of their back pocket here.
They're not going to find any. There's no new major new game plan. This is the same as what we saw last week against Leinster, only done better. And we saw aspects of it again against Connacht. Yes, when you're playing against 13, you might get a bit of an inflated view as to how good you've been. So I think they won't be patting themselves on the back too much on the back of that performance. But they've got very nice backs now, and it's about getting quality ball to them. They've got players that can give them go forward, but I looked at the quality of pass of Diolande and Farrell at the weekend. Very, very crisp, on the money, ball out in front. We saw the subtlety of Farrell's hands for the second Conway try against Leinster a couple of weeks or last week. So these things, it's constantly trying to add new aspects to your game and keep the opposition guessing. Someone like CJ Stander, I love to see him offloading the ball because you just don't expect it anymore. Footwork at the line and ability to get the ball out of contact, changing the point of contact. These are things to keep Leinster moving, keeping them on the back foot, stop that aggressive line speed. That's what they're going to need to do at the weekend to make sure that that Leinster have a more difficult day than everyone's making out.
Yeah. The all-new OTB Sports app. It's all videos, sports news, live scores, interviews, podcasts, all waiting for you. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download now.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Dad Pod. Just a video thing as well.
Doesn't have a name.
Podcast?
Midlife crisis.
Paddy Daddy.
Midlife crisis.
Dadcast?
That's not bad, actually, yeah.
Dadcast with Cadbury Freddo Treasures. Tuesdays from 3 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Bang on 8 o'clock this morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. If you've just joined us, or if you're a podcast subscriber, then you've missed some Brian O'Driscoll goodness talking about the forthcoming clash between Leinster and Munster at the weekend. You can get that wherever you get your podcast. The best place these days is obviously free, gratis and for nothing, the OTB Sports app. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store, hit subscribe to the podcast, and a little ping anytime our good content is there, and our bad content, not that we do much of that. It's available for you. We'll let you know by a little notification as well. Will O'Callaghan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Jerry. Yeah, all good this morning.
Not a night of the long knives for the FAI last night, although Nathan, who was in your role yesterday, ended up out there covering the EGM until about 9:30. We're going to speak with Larry Bass in a little while to get his take on it. So we're not going to get into the nuances of it here now. I know that the rest of the country who's listening to this are going, lads, come on, give us a little bit of intrigue from the FAI politics. But we're just going to keep it in a nice little contained unit today. In the meantime, there's plenty for us to talk about. One of the things that is becoming clear is that Chelsea's spending spree is catapulting them back into title contenders, right? That's the argument. And they should be considered, with the amount of money that they've spent, title contenders straight away.
Well, look, isn't the safety valve for Frank Lampard disappearing pretty rapidly? I mean, the argument last year, particularly in the media, whenever Chelsea didn't perform particularly well or when they were conceding goals, it was Frank Lampard didn't have a chance to spend the money. He didn't have a transfer window last year because of their registration ban. And now they have spent to rebuild their team. If Kai Havertz arrives and becomes their record signing, as is expected to happen, for a fee that will be in the end in excess of €100 million, he will have spent over €230 million this summer to try and reshape things ahead of next season. And a lot of that money has been spent in the attacking positions. And Kai Havertz has been brilliant for Bayer Leverkusen over the last couple of seasons. And he's been an emerging star in the German national team. His German colleague in Timo Werner has arrived too. And it's just going to be interesting, Jared, to see where Kai Havertz plays, because at Bayer Leverkusen, they would love to have cloned him in the last couple of seasons and played him as a false 9 and also play him as number 10. All reports seem to suggest that he is going to play in the number 10 position for Chelsea, which has been a bit of a problem area for them maybe since Oscar left, in terms of having a pure playmaker to play behind the attacker. And then you're going to look at Hakim Ziyech probably coming in to be a direct replacement for Willian, and Timo Werner, you would imagine, will probably play from the left-hand side. So that's a lot of money that has been spent, particularly on that attacking side of the team. Defence was the problem last year. They had the worst defensive record in the top half of the Premier League. That, I think, still needs addressing if they're going to catch with Man City and Liverpool, who've been so impressive over the last 2-3 seasons. Liverpool putting back-to-back 90-point seasons behind them.
Ben Chilwell not doing it for you, Will? Is that not enough?
Look,
one Ben Chilwell is not the only thing, and a 36-year-old, formerly amazing centre-back, not enough for you?
Yeah. If they'd signed Thiago Silva, the Thiago Silva, say, of 2012 to 2015, as opposed to a guy who's about to turn 36. Chilwell, look, is a fine player. They've definitely paid the England tax in paying over £50 million for him. But he's better than Mikel Alonso, and that's an upgrade on that position. But I still think Chelsea have got quite a bit of work to do. Their other record signing, Kepa, probably needs to be replaced in goal. They're running out of time to try and get some of these transfers complete if they are going to do, say, a major restructuring of their defence. But I would still think that their defence is too weak to mount a Premier League challenge. But there really are no excuses for them not to push well into the top 4 and to be a lot closer to the top 2 than they were last year, given how they've invested.
We've included Frank Lampard in the Gillette pressure rankings on various Mondays back when we started and when football was still on. My argument at that stage was that there's no way that he should feel under pressure. This was before the transfer splurge, given that this is clearly what the owner wanted. He wanted one of his boys who's been there the whole time he's been there, who's been successful, who's been part of winning teams in all of the competitions that they've won. Frank Lampard has been a key member of the team. And I was making the point that, look, of all of the managers that he's ever had, Roman Abramovich is going to have more patience with Frank Lampard than anybody else. He has certainly backed Frank Lampard with all of his money at a point when it seems like there's loads of value in the transfer market. Chelsea are still paying Chelsea prices for stuff. So I've changed my mind. I think Frank Lampard is under a little bit of pressure, Will.
Look, if I was a Chelsea fan, my first consideration in all this would be that there was lots of talk that Roman Abramovich had cut down on his own personal investment into the club. And was he going to spend that kind of money when we come into a pandemic? We've had the answer to that now. I think Frank Lampard, just purely because he's a club legend, will have some of that pressure eased on him. As you mentioned, this is Abramovich putting one of his boys in charge. It's that kind of narrative, a bit like Pep Guardiola taking over at Barcelona, that kind of one of their own is going to be coaching the team. And then I also think the English media have definitely been guilty. This is Frank Lampard, who was nominated for Manager of the Year after what was a pretty middling season. If Maurizio Sarri had been in charge, I think they would have been calling for his head this year. And all that pressure was taken off. He's got his first cousin working on Sky Sports, who is continually defending Frank Lampard and everything that Chelsea does. So he gets a softer ride as a result. I think, again, last season, if a different manager than Frank Lampard had been in charge, I think there would have been a lot more question marks about how they went last season, particularly the fact that they can't defend at set pieces. And generally, they struggle to defend against the bigger teams particularly. And that cost them in a lot of the big games. So I think Frank Lampard is lucky that he has that really good relationship with Roman Abramovich. And I'm not poo-pooing on everything that he did last season, in that they still got Champions League football for the coming year.
Yeah, I thought he did an okay job for a very young manager, but it's just that the expectations at that level, I actually do think it's a very different team, and next season is going to be a completely different team from Sarri. So, there is definitely, if at any other club, if there was long-term thinking in place, you'd be able to say they'd put a new young manager in and they're going to give him some time, they're going to give him some resources to do it. But it's Chelsea, so you expect that the trapdoor gets pulled every 18 months because that's historically what's happened, unless you're winning the league. And even then, if you've just won the league, you've got about, 15 minutes of the new season not to fall out with your physio, and then all of a sudden the trapdoor gets pulled again.
Yeah, and look, Ger, if everything clicks with Chelsea next season, they could be a really good watch, because the players that they've signed are excellent at running with the football. They're going to be a very good attacking side. I think Kai Havertz is going to give them a different direction in terms of being able to unlock defences. And then it's a case of working out who's going to play at number 9 probably. Does Tammy Abraham get the chance he got at the start of last season? Or do they go directly to putting Timo Werner maybe into the number 9 role as opposed to playing off the left? And then Hakim Ziyech was brilliant for Ajax a couple of seasons ago. Didn't have quite as good a year last year, but then understandably, he knew that he was getting his transfer to the Premier League during the middle of the season. And Ajax didn't recreate the form that they showed in 2018 when they got to the Champions League semi-finals. No. So it'll be interesting to see how they're going to click. They don't have a whole lot of time, and Chelsea haven't been helped by these players coming back with COVID-19 from holiday, which means that they're in self-isolation. So I wouldn't expect that Chelsea are going to hit the ground running as a result in the first few weeks of the season, but I'm looking forward to seeing them and seeing how this money is going to make a difference for them.
All right, 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us. That's our WhatsApp. Just send us a WhatsApp and we'll read it out if it's clean enough. Some of the stuff that you send us sometimes not so broadcastable. Right, Shane Hannon is with us this morning. Shane, how are you?
Morning, lads. Keeping well, and yourselves?
You've recovered. You're well again?
I'm well again, thanks. Yeah, I was down in the dumps there for a couple of days, but back at it. People always get suspicious when you get sick during a pandemic. But
yes, they do.
Thankfully, it was nothing serious.
Okay. You're not one of those COVID deniers, are you? It's like not
serious. At all.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Where are we going?
He's denying he has COVID.
Yes, I definitely didn't have COVID, thankfully. But
the test is no crack. The test is no crack. It's like
I want to avoid the test at all, by all means, because it does not look too comfortable, to say the least.
It's over in 10 seconds though, so don't be avoiding it if you need it. Just as the tiny last bit ever we'll ever do as a public service, don't avoid the test. Go and get the test if you need it, and you'll feel much better after your negative comes through.
Yeah, that's true. Peace of mind is what we all need, I think.
Where are we starting?
Yeah, well, why don't we start September with a little bit of corporate governance, because that's what we all love to talk about. FAI interim CEO Gary Owens saying next year's finances are based on no fans being allowed to attend games. The association was saved from insolvency last night. A comfortable majority voting in favour of the governance reforms required to secure €35 million of government funding. However, Owens says the FAI's financial state remains fragile and hasn't ruled out a rebrand. And council members with over 10 years service can remain until 2022, when a General Assembly will be established. 6 independent directors will come onto the board, but a casting vote will lie with the FAI president. I know that's a story you'll be covering plenty more on the show this morning. And Nathan Murphy spoke to Roy Barrett last night. You can listen to that full interview on the OTB Sports app or at youtube.com/offtheball. Manchester United are on the verge of their very first summer signing. Ajax midfielder Donny van de Beek has completed his medical before a £40 million move to Old Trafford. Former United defender Gary Neville says he likes the club's transfer policy, but still thinks they have a long way to go if they're to challenge for the Premier League title.
The squad as it stands today can't challenge for the title this season. It needs 4 or 5 improvements. I do believe more in the strategy of what's happening. They just have to get the deals over the line. That's not always easy, but they have to try and do it quickly to give Ollie the time to be able to get this team moulded for the start of the season.
Here at home, first half goals from Promise Omechere and Dinny Corcoran booked Bohemians' place in the quarter-finals of the Extra.ie FAI Cup. Keith alongside were 2-0 winners at home to Cabinteely yesterday. Joining them in the hat for the last 8 are Shamrock Rovers, who were 2-1 winners at home to Cork City. Meanwhile, Longford Town moved to within 2 points of top spot in the SSE Electricity First Division, courtesy of their 3-1 win over Wexford. The Republic of Ireland squad continue their preparations today for their UEFA Nations League trip to Bulgaria, which of course is on Thursday. Liverpool goalkeeper Caoimhín Kelleher joined up with the squad last night following an injury to Kieran O'Hara. After 2 close shaves in the opening stages, Sam Bennett is unlikely to feature in the shake-up for today's 4th stage of the Tour de France. The peloton are set to finish with a first category climb to the ski resort of Orsières-Merlet. Julian Alaphilippe wears the leader's yellow jersey currently. Some tennis. Andy Murray plays his first Grand Slam match since the first round of the 2019 Australian Open later. The 3-time Grand Slam winner returns from a hip injury to face world number 49 Yoshihito Nishioka in the first round of the US Open. There was defeat last night for teen sensation Coco Gauff, who went down in 3 sets to Anastasia Sevastova. Serena Williams' latest attempt to equal Margaret Court's record of 24 Grand Slam titles continues later. This year's 3rd seed takes on Christy Ann, and Serena Williams has been speaking in the build-up.
You know, normally you feel a little more worn in and ready to get this final slam over, but it's not even the final slam anymore, well, for this year at least. So I don't really know how to feel. I'm definitely not fatigued in a sense of match play at all.
Former Manchester City midfielder David Silva has tested positive for the coronavirus. His diagnosis was confirmed on the same day he was introduced as a new Real Sociedad player at a news conference. Silva is not displaying any symptoms and is now self-isolating. And finally, some basketball from me this morning, lads. The Oklahoma City Thunder have forced a deciding 7th game of their NBA playoff series with the Houston Rockets after a 104-100 win last night. The winner of today's deciding game will go on to play the Los Angeles Lakers in the semi-finals. The Eastern Conference is at the semi-final stage, with the Miami Heat upsetting top seed Milwaukee Bucks 115-104.
All right, good stuff, Shane. Thanks for that. Shane's going to be updating us across the day on otbsports.com about everything else that's happening in the world of sport. 12 minutes past 8 this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number. Of course, on Twitter, just use the hashtag OTB AM. It's the name of the show. And you can leave a comment for us on our YouTube channel as well. A little bit later on, we're going to... Is Shane still there, actually? Or is he gone? No, he's gone. Sorry. I was going to ask him about his interview that's coming up a little bit later on. We've had the good fortune to talk with Tommy in the past, but Shane's sat down and recorded him on video. One of our greatest ever drivers who made it to the fringes of Formula One, but was such a maverick that the Formula One establishment didn't really know what to do with him. That's coming up your way a little bit later on the show as well. We're going to take a quick break and we're back talking with Larry Bass, who's the chairman of Cabinteely, about the situation at the FAI. Back after this.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction...
It is a loss, there's no question. We're going to have to adapt as best we can.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
I tried to view the lockdown as... I tried to see a silver lining and say this is my opportunity to work on my weaknesses.
The OTB Brief. Weekday mornings from 7:20 a.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Listen on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
A huge night last night for the FAI. Their much talked about EGM was held essentially remotely to give those people with the vote the opportunity to decide whether or not they backed the plans put in place by the current board and the independent chairman and the interim chief executive, having done a deal with the government and various other stakeholders, including the Bank of Ireland, specifically the Bank of Ireland, back in March now at this point. There has been much debate recently about it. There was the meeting a couple of weeks ago at the Red Cow where there was an opportunity to clear the air. Some changes as a result of that meeting were agreed with the government. Some stuff that looked like it had been set in stone by the agreement and the memorandum of understanding that had been signed ultimately ended up being negotiable, and a few concessions were made. The independent chairman no longer has the casting vote. The 6 and 6 breakdown of the board will actually go ahead and continue. The 10-year term limits for those people who are currently on committees has been essentially extended for another couple of years to give people at least another couple of years to get used to the idea of 10-year term limits. So we're going to speak with Larry Bass in a moment. First of all, I want to bring you this from last night. We have the FAI interim CEO, Gary Owens, talking with Joe, followed by the FAI's independent chairman, Roy Barrett, speaking to Nathan Murphy. So 2 quick clips for you to give you a sense of what they're talking about last night. And it's specifically about the role of the Governor of the Bank of Ireland in the appointment of Roy Barrett. Have a look.
But you don't want this around the FAI anymore. None of us want this around the FAI. We don't want to come out in this way either. You know, I mean, how many months are we into it and we find out the Patrick Kennedy link? And all of that, just for obvious reasons, leaves people a little bit uneasy, to say the least. Why are we finding out about this? Why is it coming out this way?
Well, I think, Joe, to be fair, AMROB were the people who were employed to recommend people to the nominations committee, and you know, Roy went through that process, and AMROB would have reached out to different people, as they probably always do, to try to sort of achieve that.
And do you think, given the Bank of Ireland situation with the FAI, AMROB should have been going near Patrick Kennedy?
I don't know whether he did or not, to be honest. I don't know the circumstances on whether Patrick rang them or AMROB rang Patrick Kennedy.
Okay, so either way, I would put it, that phone call shouldn't happen. Bank of Ireland should not be consulted when it comes to an FAI hiring. Like, if we're doing things properly, Bank of Ireland shouldn't be anywhere near that.
Well, I think, okay, I would certainly accept the point in terms of potential conflict of interest, but I think what we were left with, I basically came in just as the MOU was being basically signed and had to sort of finalise the arrangements with Bank of Ireland. And quite honestly, Joe, there was nobody else interested in it. You know, we did make 1 or 2 conversations. I had 1 or 2 conversations with alternatives to see whether or not we could get cheaper financing, and nobody was interested in providing us with the type of support that we needed. And we were working constantly with Sport Ireland and the department, and indeed UEFA and FIFA, to try and get the guarantees in place that would actually allow the Bank of Ireland to give us the money. So, you know, I'd go as far as to say it was the only show in town at the time.
As you say, like, it's such a shame that Stephen and the team start in Bulgaria on Thursday, which I'm really looking forward to. It'll be good to talk about football now, and Finland at the weekend, and we have no people who are able to attend that. So that's a real shame, and that's going to be a real challenge for the organisation.
I understand there were several questions about your appointment and the role of Patrick Kennedy within that.
Yeah.
From Bank of Ireland.
Yeah.
When did you first speak to Patrick Kennedy about this job?
I only spoke to Patrick once when I was approached by AMROB, and I spoke with AMROB. They told me that a number of people had recommended me, including Patrick. I talked to Patrick after that meeting for about 2 or 3 minutes, and that's what it was. So I think quite a lot has been made of it, and there's a bit of a conspiracy theory around it, but there's nothing untoward in my view, and certainly in terms of my dealing with Bank of Ireland or any other of the stakeholders. You know, did it represent any form of conflict whatsoever? No, it didn't.
Did you not think at any stage when you're having that very short conversation with him that him being the head of the main banker for a debt-ridden organisation may well be a conflict, even viewed as a conflict from the outside.
Sure, but you have to remember, when I had that conversation, I had only just been approached, and what I did, having met Amrap the first time, was said I would think about the role, and in thinking of it, I wanted to meet a number of people, including people from the FAI, from the accountants, Grant Thornton, from the department, for the ministers, from Sport Ireland, from Mr. Horan, who did the governance reforms, to acquaint myself with all of the issues and make a decision as to whether I thought I could help the organisation or not. So in terms of did I think that meeting in any way compromised me? Not at all, actually.
There's a lot of talk this week of a new era, both on and off the pitch, but do you think this story casts something of a shadow over that the transparency that people would expect from the new FAI maybe isn't quite there?
But it's completely transparent. Like, it's completely transparent. Amrap approached me on the basis of a number of recommendations, one of whom we now know, and it's as simple as that. It's actually quite normal way of doing business.
Okay, so that is Roy Barrett was the last voice you heard there. Before that, you heard Gary Owens, both speaking with Nathan and Joe last night. Larry Bass is the chairman of Cabinteely and also a member of one of the FAI's finance committees. Larry, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Ger. How are you?
Good. So you've had a relatively prominent role in this story becoming public over the last few days. Can you maybe spool us back a couple of days to the point where I think you actually wrote a letter to Roy Barrett? Is that how this began to emerge?
I've written a few letters to Roy Barrett. I suppose you need to spool back further. I was one of these people that, post the governance review last summer. I was asked to put myself forward for a couple of committees on the FAI through the FAI Council. I put my name forward for the Finance Committee because I felt I could bring some experience to bear. I've been on finance, audit and risk committees of national boards. And I thought that, the FAI is something that needed to clean up its governance act. I think that was one of the things that was pretty obvious. So I was looking forward to getting my sleeves rolled up and helping out if I can and trying to, help chart a path back to successful football association. And as Roy and both Gary have both said, we need to put the past behind us and move on with the football. But unfortunately, they haven't covered themselves in glory when it comes to corporate governance. The simple effect of having a finance committee overseeing using the fiduciary duties to just question the financial arrangements or implications for the organisation, they haven't met. So I can see no reason. They keep kicking the touch and giving excuses, saying there was no terms of reference. Well, there was. They said they weren't happy with the terms of reference. Yet, there's an interim board, an interim chair, an interim CEO. You could have an interim finance committee and still have the questions and get on with it. So excuses aren't good enough. I would like to see the finance committee being established and doing what it's supposed to do. It's not there to...
Can I just I'm sorry to interrupt because obviously Gary Owens isn't here and I don't want to get bogged down in this part of the story too much because there's loads to get our teeth into. But Gary Owens did tell Joe on last night's show that they brought that to the board and the current board were unhappy with the terms of reference because they felt that it was reducing their power of oversight. Now, whether or not that's true, I suspect you have a different view and that's fair enough, right? And look, the sooner all these committees get up and running and are reporting to the board and we all have a sense of those committees functioning properly, which is, I think, what we want, then that would be good. Was that enough for you? Was that enough of a red flag straight away? Do you have any sympathy with the view that, like, your committee gets formed last, I think, October, and the new independent chair comes in January, and then the CEO comes in after that. So technically it's not their committee, and I can understand that there was a massive flaming fire. The house is on fire over here with the possibility of the entire organisation going bust. You probably want to put that fire out first before this fire over here. Maybe they should have been doing a little bit of firefighting on both sides.
Yeah, if you're going into a forest fire, you want to make sure you've got cover all around. And I think ignoring simple corporate governance when you're doing something on an organisation where corporate governance was to the fore is careless, is the best way I could describe it, for if nothing else. And I think if there was an issue, if the board had a concern over the terms of reference, which Nobody had said anything about that up until these recent excuses started coming out. It was never conveyed to us there was any issue. They should have just met, and if there was to be parameters around what the Finance Committee could say or do, that could be put in place. But just ignoring it and not putting it in place, I was elected by the council, so I'm answering to the council. As a person on the Finance Committee representing the council, I was asking questions in relation to finance. And when it came to hearing that Roy Barrett was potentially conflicted in his role as the chair through any relationship he may have with the single biggest creditor, I just have to ask the question. I asked the question. And to me, I don't believe it's been answered correctly. If you have one single creditor who are the major creditor, and then that creditor has a role in whatever the role is in appointing the person who's going to oversee the negotiation on that debt, that simply feels to me incorrect.
Just to play devil's advocate and just to tease this out a little bit, okay? Neil Reardon had a piece last week where the more details of this emerged, right? He said that Barrett secured the job when 2 preferred candidates declined and a third was not approached. Like, in that instance, I can see how AMROP end up going, okay, look, we need a list of people here. The first 2 people we've gone to have said no thanks, and then a third candidate's not approached. I don't know why the third candidate wouldn't have been approached, but it doesn't seem like there was a whole slew of people queuing up to take this gig.
I wasn't part of that process. My understanding is that there were a number of names or candidates preferred, and out of the blue, Roy's name came into the fold. I've never met Roy. I've never had a conversation with the man, and he could be an absolute fantastic chair. I just think the way this is operated is incorrect. As a member of the Finance Committee, I was questioning it. And we do have to get our house in order. We do have to get things right. But, shutting up shop on one of the most serious parts of corporate governance and just ignoring it. And you now have a situation where, thankfully now we can move on. A decision is made, and I'm a Democrat like everybody else. And we can try and move on and do the work that's supposed to be done. But the Finance Committee still hasn't been put together. The latest I heard was it might be convened in March. But if I'm led to believe what Gary Owens is saying, they're bringing in the right and proper test for all candidates for these committees. So am I right and proper? Are others? There's nothing to stop the committee being formed, post AGM at least at the latest, as far as I'm concerned, not waiting until March.
Sorry, March next year?
Well, that's what Gary Owens said in a recent interview about it.
That does seem to be quite far away. I think you're right to be asking questions. I think given the amount of public money that's gone in and given the fact that essentially the final guarantee on a portion of the loan, some of it seems to be being guaranteed by UEFA and FIFA, and some of it seems to be being guaranteed by the government. So absolutely, I think everybody wants a strong finance committee, which isn't just controlled by the board, essentially, because like this, there needs to be checks and balances, and certainly history shows that the more checks and balances there are in all of our sports organisations, the better it's going to be. Do you have concerns that the board were concerned about the powers of the Finance Committee, if that story is accurate?
Well, if they're concerned, what is the problem? Let's hear about it. That's what openness and transparency is. And I would question the minister. The previous minister obviously had a close relationship with Roy, and the incumbent minister, I don't know what her relationship is, but asking, questions about some of the roles and just getting all the facts, I would have thought is critical. Nobody has contacted me. It's no secret that I had questions about the various aspects, and if the government are going to stand over something, you would think that they would check out all the facts around these things. Sport Ireland, again, I've had no conversations there. They don't have to contact me, but all I did was ask questions. That's what I see the role of a finance committee or an audit and risk committee. You're not there to do the work. You're not there to do the negotiation. You're not there to set out the agenda for spending the cash, but you are there to oversee and ask questions, is it being done correctly? Nothing else.
How many people are on that committee, as a matter of interest? How many of you are there?
Well, there were 2 elected through the council, and then there needed to be somebody, I think, from the board would be appointed probably as the chair of the committee, and then a couple of independent members. That's my understanding, but because we haven't met, I couldn't honestly answer any more. But a finance committee that I've been on previously could be anything from 3 people to 5 people.
And just explain for people who are listening who might be unfamiliar, if you're not setting out financial policy and you're not doing deals, what exactly are you doing?
Well, you're questioning that some of the executive and or the board are setting out policy, that you're there as a sort of the full stop to make sure that the right and correct questions have been asked. I mean, that's why I've said, I'd like to have seen, as a finance committee member, I'd like to have seen some cost-benefit analysis on the options. I mean, there was one option put to the council last night. And that option, having spent 6 months trying to control the board and wanting to have control of the board, they capitulated a couple of weeks ago to change the rules to allow the president to have the casting vote rather than the chair. And also to extend term for people who've been there for over 10 years. So, as you rightly said, things were negotiable. The only thing that seems to be not negotiable is the actual debt. So, a couple of things I would like to have seen. I'd like to have seen cost-benefit analysis on where the debt negotiation's going, cost-benefit analysis on other options, up to and including, liquidation, examinership. What can you do to give choice? None of that was made apparent, and there's been chapter and verse in history of where examinership have helped organisations and companies not only fix financial issues but get stronger and better. And we didn't see any discussion about that. And I'm just asking the questions. That's all I am. So,
can you explain maybe to people what an examinership might have looked like, or a successful examinership in this instance might have looked like? Because I guess. Certainly from listening to the unions, they were very concerned about the potential for job losses, and Gary Owens last night said the only show in town was the debt and the government deal, that he picked up the phone to other potential lenders and couldn't even get a meeting.
Yeah, that's, and again, I wasn't in any of those conversations, so I don't know. All I'm saying is there are other options, and they didn't talk about examinership. And with examinership, and, I feel for all the employees, you have to remember as well, there are over 200 people working in the FAI, and they do a fantastic job. And they've done an extremely fantastic job during the teeth of all of this. When all of this is going on above their heads, and yet they've got to get on and do the day job. So, hats off to every single individual employee. One thing with an examinership is you get the protection of the courts, number one. So until all the details of the business is looked at and a plan is brought out, you just don't start laying people off. And you restructure the organisation to what it should be and what it can be in the future, including negotiating with all the creditors and setting out a new plan to work within its means. Currently, the FAI, if it's to meet its debt repayments, it's going to be living a little bit beyond its means. It's not going to have an awful lot of free cash available to put into Irish football and develop the facilities that are badly required.
Shouldn't they pay their debts, though? Isn't that the right thing to do for any organisation, particularly a sports organisation?
Of course they should, but also anyone who provides credit needs to make sure that before they give the credit, there's the means to repayment. So, there's all sorts of negotiations need to be taken on and looked into. And all I was looking for was, what were the options? What happened? Asking just simple questions that I felt was required to be asked. Still haven't heard answered.
Do you think it was realistic to expect that the Bank of Ireland would offer a write-down, given that ultimately they know UEFA and FIFA have loads of money, and there's whatever the tenancy agreement is on the Aviva, at some point there is a value to that, although it's very difficult to crystallise exactly what that might be, and that the government were unlikely on their watch to allow the FAI to go into liquidation, certainly. Maybe they might have had some appetite for examinership, but I'm not sure about that in the middle of the crisis. That ultimately Bank of Ireland are in a very strong position going, we're happy to refinance, but you're going to have to pay your debts.
I can't answer. I'm not here to negotiate for Bank of Ireland. They're well capable of doing that. It seemed to have done a very good job in this case. But I think, questions have to be asked. If Bank of Ireland senior personnel are suggesting to people to head up the organisation, they're going to have to negotiate with. That's all. I question that. I do question the fact that there was no negotiation of the debt, none whatsoever. I actually think the FAI had a strong hand as well. What is the market for a part share in a national stadium? So if the bank were going to call in the loan, they were sitting on a property that they had a part share of, that's not a very strong hand. So I'll sit down and negotiate with anyone and put all the cards on the table and drive the hardest bargain as possible.
So is that ultimately your contention here, is that you don't feel like the FAI got a good deal? Is that because, ultimately,
no, because I haven't seen the details of it, and I have asked, that's what the Finance Committee should be doing, is overseeing these things and seeing all the papers related to it. All I'm doing is asking the questions. And I would like to have seen what the options were. I'd like to see in any sort of business, whether it's big or small, you should do cost-benefit analysis on the various decisions that are going to affect the ongoing future of the business. And we just didn't see it. That's all.
Look, again, Gary Owens isn't here, right? But he did say that the only show in town, we were 2 weeks from going bust. We had to do a deal. No one was offering us finance. Like, if you spool back to that point in time, the FAI was a toxic brand. It's a little less toxic now, but still it's going to be very interesting to see what sponsors come on board as the main sponsors for the next while. It's not in a very good position. The cost-benefit analysis might not have resulted in a hugely different, and I don't know that they didn't do one. You're saying you haven't seen it, and that's fair enough. Were there multiple options at that point, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't in that place where I could, I wasn't in the driving seat having those conversations. I'll take Gary's word for it that if there was no other game in town. But all I'm saying is that there was questions that I was asking as a Finance Committee member, and I wanted to ask them within the Finance Committee, so we weren't, these things could be answered there and then and dealt with. But because they elected not to proceed with convening the Finance Committee, I felt it was my fiduciary duty on behalf of the people who elected me, which were the council members, to ask simple questions. I also decided, unlike some other colleagues on other committees who got exasperated and just left and resigned from committees, I just feel that if I'm going to be taken off the committee, then it's up to the council to remove me, and until I'm removed, I'll have to continue asking questions. That's what I was elected to do.
So you're going to stay. You're going to stay the course, and that's good to hear, because it feels like these questions are absolutely necessary. Is it possible that the organisation as it's constituted now can appoint a finance committee and begin to function properly, or is this current board and the chairman and the CEO, do you feel like there's no recovery from the position that they put themselves in as far as you're concerned?
I've called for the resignation of the independent members of the board, with the exception of Robert Watt, who joined it late, because I feel the oversight in this matter is questionable. And I think the FAI, above anything else, needs to have squeaky clean corporate governance. End of story, full stop. And if it's going to be, the brand is going to be reborn, if it's going to achieve the heady heights of Battalion 90 and all of that good stuff that it should be doing, you've got the Irish girls, ladies international team starting to now achieve the heights of, stratospheric performance, and all our underage teams, and hopefully now Stephen Kenny's new brush will do the same. The football side of it is thankfully going really well. We need to get our house in order off the pitch, and I was trying to make sure that it was starting from a squeaky clean start with all full transparency. And I believe, I'm a full believer in clear transparency. It's ultimate power. If things aren't transparent, questions get asked.
Can I just ask why the difference between the independent directors and the elected football directors? Why do you exempt the elected football directors from your call for resignation?
Because my feeling is that the independent directors' number one duty will be to ask the questions independent of all the people who have been involved in football for many years. And I would have thought that's their job. They're there to put on the board to oversee the football side to make sure everything has been done correctly. And frankly, corporate governance for me is the foundation.
But once you're on the board, you're on the board. You're not on the board with a specific role unless you're actually appointed on to a specific committee. So, for example, if an independent member of the board gets appointed the chair of your finance committee, then they have responsibility to report back to the board. But once you're in the boardroom, once the meeting starts, everybody's equal.
Yeah, but I think the independent people have been brought in so that they're there to, question what's going on, and that's why everybody wanted to see a board, and I applaud the fact that there's a new board and there is independent members. But I was questioning their appointment if they're not actually doing the basic details of corporate governance. Maybe they were inside the boardroom, but you were not seeing it outside. Okay,
do you have confidence in the independent chair now?
I think there's a question over this appointment, and all I can do is ask the questions, and it's up to the independent chair to answer them.
He did answer them last night, as far as he's concerned, Larry. And in fairness to him, he says that what happened was Amrop approached him, and he phoned one of the people who talked to Amrop to see what the crack was before he got the gig. And then he takes the gig. So he's, as far as he's concerned, has answered that. And I suppose it's a question for you as somebody who's steeped in football in Ireland, a chair of a League of Ireland club. Do you have confidence in the independent chair at the moment?
I'm going to reserve my position on that and see how things play out. And I still think there's questions to be answered in the relationship between the main creditor. And I'd like to see the full resolution and answers on that. We're living in a different Ireland now. This is an Ireland that doesn't take, lightly simple questions on where there may be a conflict of interest. And until there's absolute proof positive there isn't, you have to ask the question. Simple as.
Okay, so if there was proof positive that there wasn't a conflict of interest, that would be the point where you would say I have confidence. What would, in terms of reserving your position, what would force you to say you don't have confidence?
Well, if I feel that there was something untoward and there was nothing being done, but at the moment I believe that the ignoring of the convening of two of the key committees, for me, I have questioned it. That's why I wrote to Roy in the first place, and question things, because it seems to be the only way to get an answer is you have to send a letter, and then when you send a letter and ask for it to be copied to every member of the board, suddenly it's in the press before half of them even read it. So that seems to be the way to get any answers. It's unfortunate, but that's not the way it should be done if the committees were convened and we could all ask questions in the form that they should be done.
So last week's New Era launch, you're not convinced that we've begun a new era just yet?
Look, it's teething problems, I hope. And I do hope and wish everybody well in trying to drive on. But if there's a cloud and it has to be blown away, I would concern myself in getting all that done correctly and done first. Because the FAI can't live under any cloud. The FAI needs to be reborn and, get back to what it's, there to do. Next year it's 100 years old, and it would be great to get into that year with the organisation in fine fettle with a great foundation and every part of it unquestionably in great hands.
Larry Bass, Chairman of Cabinteely and a member of the as yet unconstituted Finance Committee. Thanks very much for joining us this morning and giving us your reaction to yesterday's vote.
Cheers, Greg. Chair.
It's 8:43 this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number to text us on. You can always, that's by WhatsApp, and you can leave a comment, hashtag OTB AM. Talking actual on-pitch football with Stephen Doyle later on in the show. But here's Nathan on watching Stephen Kenny's very first Irish training session. Mickey Quinn of Longford is up next.
Stephen Kenny saying everything we do today, we do with intensity. And he seemed to be going through what the plan for the session was. We'll do some 11v11. We'll go into smaller groups. And then what you saw in those videos was essentially just another part of the warm-up with a ball at their feet, little quick-fire passing, 20-yard sprints, that sort of thing. There was no real indication from that. But listen, everyone was full of smiles. There was a lot of conversations going on, particularly between Keith Andrews and Stephen Kenny. Damien Duff and Rory Higgins, who's essentially the opposition analysis, were deep in conversation as well. So, as you would expect, it's the first day.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a smile on their face. Everybody wants to see exactly what's going to happen. And yeah, definite buzz around the place. I was out here yesterday for his first press conference, and you could sense the excitement from him that it was finally here, that he was getting to meet the players for the first time last night for a pretty intense week, I think, as well. The way Darren Randolph was talking today, I was asking were there any initiation ceremonies or a few songs, the usual thing you would get, and he was saying no, it was sort of a team meeting with Stephen Kenny outlining what his vision is and how he wants them to play. And listening to Darren Randolph and some of the other players today, it's very clear they know what Stephen Kenny wants. They're all talking about a more possession-based game, of not sitting back anymore and being well organised and trying to keep a team at bay. They were all talking, as Stephen Kenny has, pretty much word for word the way Stephen Kenny has for the last couple of years, of changing how we approach these games, of trying to get on the front foot early, which is music, I think, to all of our ears. As you said earlier, there's no guarantees in international football, but I think this is a good week to start.
That's Nathan talking about Stephen Kenny on last night's football show. You can subscribe to the Football Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Now, I want to turn to the story in Longford GAA that's been bubbling away now. It turns out for months, but ultimately has hit the public consciousness over the last 3 weeks as the county champions Killoe Young Emmets were banned for 48 weeks, and as a result every member of the club is banned from all GAA activity for 48 weeks. Mickey Quinn joins us this morning. He's a member of the Killoe Young Emmets Club and of course an inter-county footballer and a friend of the show at this stage. Mickey, how are you?
Good, Jar. Yourself?
I'm good. I mean, look, we are not involved in this story, and so therefore it just seems like it's an intractable bit of a nightmare for everybody involved. I can only imagine what it's actually like to be at the centre of it, where your very existence as a member of a GAA club that allows you to do the thing that you've given so much of your time to do so is at risk for the next 48 weeks. What is the very latest situation, Mickey?
Yeah, this is rumbled on from an under-16 game where allegedly there was a red card overturned or a match report changed to from a red card to 2 yellow cards, and as a result of some pressure being put on externally, and as a result of that our club didn't play an under-16 final because there was a hearing ongoing, and from that a €750 fine was given out by the county board, and between the hearings ongoing and lockdown coming in, the fine wasn't paid and a 48-week ban was imposed on the club. That's probably the shortened version. There's probably lots in between along the way, because this is rumbled on. That game it's 12 months, it was September last year that this is all rumbled on from. So it's dragging on massively, and we're at a crossroads now where we have 48 weeks of a ban, and it's just a real kick in the teeth for a club after coming out of lockdown, spending 4 months in lockdown in isolation, and it just goes completely against what the GAA ethos is about community and volunteering and being part of the community. We're a traditional Irish GAA club, 2 pubs, a church and a GAA pitch in our community, and you can only imagine how important the GAA is for the likes of Killoe at this time, and especially the way things have been for the last number of months.
So again, I was completely unaware that a 48-week ban is actually a 48-week ban on all GAA activities. So if you've any referees in the club, they can't go and referee. If you've stewards, you can't steward at county games. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the moment we have 5 referees that are members of the club. They're not allowed to officiate any games. We have 2 or 3 guys going off to college that have potential scholarships, GAA scholarships lined up that they look like they could be in jeopardy too. We have 5 members on the Longford inter-county team, the senior team, that looks like that's not going to happen. We won't be able to play inter-county for the next 48 weeks. And then we've also, like myself, I'm a teacher here in St. Mel's College in Longford, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to coach a team whenever we're back playing football here in the school. On top of other members that can officiate, other members that are involved in coaching, in different aspects of the club or other clubs around Longford and other counties, that they can't be on the line for games. And it just seems absurd and ridiculous that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. Well, sorry, this is about an under-16 game and a €750 fine, and all of a sudden we're talking about potential for kids' scholarships going to college being stopped. Essentially, yes. And I suppose that's the thing that probably sitting on our hands the last while, that it's, okay, let's see the process, let's let it take place, and hopefully we'll get to the end of it. But this is dragged out for so long now. And you talk about mental health and well-being, and how kids nowadays, with the dropout rate from under 16s on, it's so high in GAA, and you're given something like this to your own club. Like, it's detrimental to our club, to be honest, that this could definitely put serious pressure under a club like ourselves. What's your own instinct? I mean, people will be familiar with your story. You went to Australia, you came back, you play inter-county football, you keep playing inter-county football, even though it's, the Leinster Championship is a difficult thing for any team that isn't Dublin, but you keep showing up year in, year out, and you're obviously centrally involved in the storied academy that is the school that you teach in, and you keep going to the school. Will you play for Longford again if this ban comes in? Well, personally, it just feels ridiculous now that 10 years, you give 10 years of a career to your club and your county, and to be honest, you look across the board that you're spending more time with your county than your club the last number of years. But you're questioning everything that you've done for the last 10 years, that I've given up this, I've missed weddings, I've even at the stage now where wife's due in the start of October, and you're talking about planning around different bits and pieces with an inter-county championship starting up and running in October, and you're thinking to yourself, what's it all about? That's just from my personal side of things. There's definitely other people in similar positions that in the club that have given so much, and to be thrown back in our face like that, it doesn't fit what the GAA is about. So you consider your own future in the aftermath of this, that we might have seen the end of you in a Longford jersey? Yeah, that's definitely something that has gone through my mind the last 3-4 weeks, that that could be it for me. I find it very hard to love putting on the blue and gold of Longford, but it's something that's there now that I'm not sure that it's something that I'd be willing to. That the older you get, the harder it's going to be, and with this, it surely is something that it makes you question it. So, from a legal, technical, bureaucratic perspective, this has gone all the way to the DRA. Is that hearing today or tomorrow? As far as I know, it's this week. I don't know, have the club got a date or a time for that yet, but as far as I know, it's to happen this week. So we're just sitting, waiting, hoping that sense prevails and we get to the bottom of this and can actually do what probably the lockdown imposed on us at the beginning, and that sense of joy and camaraderie that comes with that lockdown being lifted, that we can actually go out and express ourselves and just play football and play for the right reasons, that you're playing for your family and your friends and your community, that's something that's taken away from you and taken out of your control with the lockdown. And then with this afterwards, it just really has been a hammer blow to our community. It's look, local disputes are always probably the most keenly felt, but it seems as if the GAA centrally have had, I think Pádraig Duffy was involved in mediation. There is no better person to understand exactly how the GAA functions and to understand ways for this to be navigated out. But even that was unsuccessful, I think. Is that correct? As far as I know, that finished up. There was a mediation process, then there was a Leinster hearings committee, and then we're at the stage now where it's at the DRA. So, I'm probably, at the end of the day, I'm a member and I'm a player, and that side of things is something that I don't know the ins and outs. But when you're turning up to go training and you want to go training, and this is in the background there where you're not sure what's happening. It feels like we're going back to square one, where you're not able to train, and you're just sitting waiting for that call that that you're able to go now.
Are you surprised, given everything you know and how long you've been involved in the intercounty setup, that a local dispute can become so toxic and so poisonous?
I wouldn't say surprised, but I probably surprised at the length that this has gone on. Something like this could definitely be swept under the rug or pushed aside very quickly. And that's probably something that's really been disappointed with Longford, that there's been so much good work done, from coaching to other bits and pieces throughout the years. But it's always one step forward, two steps back. And this kind of shows what's holding back the counties like Longford, that it just, you don't see it happening in other counties, and then you're wondering why the gap is getting bigger and bigger, when there's such good things happening, and then all of a sudden you're talking about one of the top clubs in the county been taken out of from minor right up to senior, that essentially all those players that might have contributed to county teams or county coaching aren't able to do that for the next 48 weeks.
But I think the point you made about the general sense of belonging that people are going to have, like if I was doing my Leaving Cert, or if I was heading in to get a any kind of scholarship to help me with the expenses of going to college, and all of a sudden I'm not allowed because of a dispute about an under-16 game a couple of seasons back, I'm not really sure that I'd be willing to spend my time volunteering for this organisation, or to be a part of this organisation that doesn't really take my club's and my community's interests at heart for the sake of 750 quid. I understand rules are important, but like at some point you go, okay, this does seem like it's a little bit out of kilter here. Something has happened along the way and we all need to calm down, step back. Maybe somebody will pay the fine. I don't know if even on a point of principle if the fine's going to get paid, but whatever it is at this stage, like, let's all move on.
This is it. Like we've a young guy in the club who's playing soccer with Shamrock Rovers. Great potential, and he's up and down to Shamrock Rovers, and it's great to see. And you'd never stop someone from trying a different sport or that, but it's gone to the stage now where he can actually play for his own club and can actually play Gaelic football. So it's like, of course he's going to go off playing soccer and look at that a different road when he sees something like this going on. And you're just thinking to yourself, well, do you know what? You're at the right one. You're at the right age that if you want to go in a different direction and try a different sport, what more do you want? You're after been suspended from playing 48 weeks in another sport that you love, and it's making the choice for you.
Well, you're on mute there. We've been doing this a long time now.
Here we go. Can you hear me now, Mickey?
We can now, yeah.
I can, yeah.
Mickey, I was just going to ask, in terms of that relationship between Emmett Killoe and the Longford County Board, given all this has gone through between the initial few months, then that mediation, then the Leinster Council meeting earlier this month in Portlaoise, now the DRA, is there going to be a massive damage done between the club and the county board for the foreseeable future now?
Potentially, but I look, it's probably speculation and hearsay. I don't know the full ins and outs. Like, this is probably from my point of view and what I know, and I mightn't have the full bolts and nuts to it all, but like, it definitely has. It has until this stage, and it just seems like no matter what you do, there seems to be a roadblock put up to stop ourselves from competing. Goes to appeal after appeal after appeal, and from my side of things, it kind of looks like, geez, Killoe must be wrong here, that it's gone from one level to the next, and that's probably the public perception. But when you read into it and find out the more facts and that behind it, it's beggars belief that this is still going on.
And there's a disruption to the Longford Championship and all this too while these appeals are going through.
At the moment, we have one group game left to play, and there was two. The quarter-final draw was made, but we were kept separate because of this hearing still going on and a 48-week ban. So they restructured the draw to have Team 1 and Team 2 from our group, depending on what happens with ourselves and the DRA. So there's two quarterfinals going ahead this weekend, and the other two will be on hold until we know what's happening. And it's just it's ironic that it's gone to a stage where there's a game being held up as a result of a hearing, which in sense that's what the under 16 what happened in the first place, that a game wasn't played as a result of a hearing not taking place.
Which is incredibly disruptive when you consider inter-county training is coming back now in a few weeks' time, September 14th. This could potentially slow down two quarterfinals, because if you were to be reinstated, you still have that group game to complete. And that probably puts pressure on actually getting the championship finished before inter-county, I'd imagine, if you're put back in.
Yeah. So, yeah, look, it's to be honest, it's just a mess now at this stage, and all anyone wants to do at this stage in the year is just play ball. We played one championship game since lockdown was lifted, and that's been it. And guys chomping at the bit to play, and we're just sitting. And it's gone to the stage now where it's not just affecting our own club, that it quite potentially could affect way more clubs.
Yeah, the contagion has started. Mickey, great to talk to you. Hopefully we get to see you on a field sooner rather than later, and some kind of natural justice will prevail. But thanks very much for joining us this morning. And just to clarify, we did, of course, ask the Longford County Board for some comment, but they have as yet made themselves unavailable to either come on the show or given us any specific response to any of the queries that we had yesterday. And we'll follow the story of Emmett Killoe's 48-week ban for the non-payment of a €750 fine issued after they refused to take part in a county final because it was their belief that somehow a player would have been ineligible from the opposition, and that had not been investigated properly in the first place. That was their side of the story. We'd love to hear the other side of the story and the details of it. Apparently there are some legal letters have been read out at various county board meetings around the issuance of that red card, but ultimately the notion that a red card in an under-16 game is going to result in potentially some people losing their scholarships is absolutely ludicrous. So hopefully at some point sense will prevail. 9:01 here this morning on OTB AM. Longines Irish Champions Weekend is happening next week. Unfortunately there won't be crowds there this year, but thanks to Race and Stay and the Irish National Stud, we've got some tickets to give away this morning to next year's Champions Weekend, and the winner of those will also be entered into the draw to win 2 nights in the 4-star West Grove Hotel and Spa, with arrival on either Friday the 11th or Saturday the 12th of September. That's next week, including breakfast and a round of golf in Rathsala Golf Club, which is brilliant. It's with transport to Rathsala and back from the hotel included. The overall prize also includes a trip to the Irish National Stud, which is a great day out. Keep an eye on our social channels for that competition this morning. Now, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
The OTBsports.com. I wonder if Stockdale realises the power that he punches. This is Brian O'Driscoll talking last night about how he thinks he's a realistic option at fullback, just that left boot, the opportunity to escape when you need to, and also his physical. Just he's a bit of a beast, really, and has to kind of fully understand that himself. Roy Barrett strenuously denies conspiracy theories over conflict of interests. CEO Gary Owen says struggling FAI planning without fans for 2021, and the FAI are going to avoid insolvency after EGM backs governance changes. They're the stories last night. Caoimhín Kelleher also called up to the Ireland squad as Kenny promises passing game from Ireland. We're looking forward to that this week, and we're looking forward to talking about football as opposed to governance. Rovers miss out on big payday despite plum tie against AC Milan, so the Italian TV rights will be controlled by AC Milan, and Rovers might just stream that game themselves. Randolph embraces new era but rules out any stupid risks. And then there's match reports from last night's FAI Cup games. Barrett denies conflict of interest as reform measures back. The Irish Times using quotes from last night's Off the Ball for those stories. Here we have the Irish Sun. Zlato, folks, Hoops draw Milan. And good boy for Duffy. So Shane Duffy was last night trying to wrap up a loan move to Celtic ahead of Ireland's game in Sofia. A loan move, not the worst idea for him. The Ida Dream. Norwich Starlet ready for shot at big time. This is what I've waited for. And Beaky Blinder, even though we're calling him Van de Beek. 40 million Donny chose United as his dream destination, and even big Liverpool rival Van Dijk is delighted to see him in the Prem. The Star this morning, full stream ahead. Rovers considering, this is Mark McCadden exclusive, Rovers may snub traditional TV for the Milan clash. I guess that's a good negotiating ploy, and all of a sudden they have a platform to do it on as well. Barrett, my appointment above board. Dad gives Donny the thumbs up. Donny van de Beek's dad says he's pretty good. Football, I mean, that's good. It's good to have the support of your parents. It's Adam's strong gesture to make. So this is interesting. Adam Ida believes the Ireland team will take the knee prior to kick-off in Thursday's Nations League clash with Bulgaria in Sofia. In what will be a powerful statement by Stephen Kenny's side, the visitors will join sports people across the globe who've taken this public stance against racism in recent months. So it seems like we will take the knee, was what Adam Ida was saying yesterday. For me, 100%, I'm a big believer in ending racism, and I'm sure that the whole team is as well. When he was asked if the team were going to take a stand on the Black Lives Matter campaign, you know, putting this together with what Cyrus Christie experienced at Irish training last year, I think it would be brilliant for the team to do that, and an important opportunity for them to do it. Maybe the rugby teams should have done it, and not just left it to the players who were people of colour. Might have been interesting to see exactly what the decision-making and the thought process was behind that. But anyway, we'll come back to that, I suppose. United front, Ireland squad will take knee in Sofia clash. It's Philip Quinn's story. Duffy will love Celtic switch. Mick McCarthy is talking about that. And Blues bonus triple threat for Munster clash. So James Ryan, Tyke Furlong and Dan Levy in contention to be on the bench. Dan Levy on the bench this week would be one of the great Irish comeback stories. The London Times, never say die, Norrie in shock US Open win. So the world number 13, Diego Schwartzman, was beaten by one of the Brits who came back from 2010. Grealish called up at last. The end of the dream. Well, the dream is over. Even if FIFA changed the rules, it's going to be too late for us.
Yeah, FIFA can do what they like now at this stage. He has his 3 Lions cap about to happen in one of these 2 Nations League games. And in fairness, I think a lot of people were shocked that Grealish wasn't in the initial squad anyway, given his form for Aston Villa last season. So look, any faint hope there was that legally we might be able to take him back, Jack Grealish is now an England player.
England weighed over for Grealish. Is the Telegraph and the Guardian. Their front page story actually is better than their back page stories here. It's Marcus Rashford's new goal to tackle UK food poverty. 3 months after forcing a U-turn on summer holiday meal vouchers, the footballer Marcus Rashford served notice to number 10 of a new target, the end of child food poverty in Britain. Marcus Rashford is probably the most interesting footballer in England at the moment, getting involved in stuff and using his platform in a way that, you know, we've no right to expect somebody in their early 20s to do, but he's doing it brilliantly, and there's a template there, hopefully, for people to get involved in things and to become members of their community. A reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. What have we got, Will?
Well, bottom of the back page of the Irish Independent today, Colm Keys has a piece about what's likely to happen with the rest of the Kildare Championships. Kildare can get back playing this weekend because the lockdown was lifted maybe slightly earlier than expected. They had kind of written off this weekend in their plans. At this stage, Kildare are now onto their 4th draft fixtures for the year, and their chairperson, Mick Gorman, has been speaking, and it's in the Independent itself too, about what they're going to do for the rest of the season. So no senior hurling championship games have happened in Kildare so far. They've obviously fallen quite a bit behind in the football championship too, because they've lost 3 weekends. They were expecting to lose 4. And he said that their fixtures plan and what their controls and competition committee are going to have to do from here on out is pretty much look at things from a week-to-week basis. And they've got a lot of catching up to do. It looks like maybe they'll get the football completed in time for the inter-county seasons getting underway. But we're getting to that point now where county managers will want their players to be involved in training by the 14th of September so that they can be ready for the last 2 rounds of the league in the football. And then the start of the Leinster Championship, which is coming up in the coming months. So it's a race against time for them to get completed. We mentioned with Mickey Quinn, similarly, they've got a real race against time in Longford now, depending on what happens with that DRA hearing. And Laois and Offaly, I know at the moment are playing. They also similarly lost 2 and a bit weekends due to the localised lockdowns that they had. They're going to be playing quite a few midweek fixtures over the next few weeks just to try and catch up for lost time. So this club season, whatever's going to happen with Intercounty, it is a race to get finished. And Kildare are going to have a real job to try and get their competitions played out. The hurling championship has fallen way, way behind.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation for anybody. Like, already a very difficult scenario, and then suddenly it's like, going to take this weekend, and this weekend off, and maybe that one, I'll give you that one back. So, a labyrinthine difficulty, and hopefully games will happen thick and fast now, and everyone will get to at least play. We're not going to have any fans at them for the foreseeable, but who knows? Anything else, Will?
Just looking at Adam Ida as well, he was interviewed as part of the slew of press conferences that took place yesterday afternoon at the FAI's training centre. And it's interesting to see a lot of people are thinking he might start because Dave McGoldrick is definitely going to miss this Bulgaria game, which is coming up on Thursday. He hasn't had a huge amount of game time for Norwich, but he was a big favourite of Stephen Kenny's with the Republic of Ireland under-21 team, and he could be the player that goes right into the spearhead of that Irish attack on Thursday. Himself and Darren Randolph were both asked about the Black Lives Matter movement and whether they would take a knee. You mentioned that in the back of some of the papers, and it looks like those two are definitely at the forefront of the plan to do it in Bulgaria, which I think will be a very important symbol because we're now 11 months on from when 3 England players, Tyrone Mings, Raheem Sterling and Marcus Rashford, were racially abused by Bulgaria fans on that night where England beat Bulgaria 6-0 in Sofia. They got a 2-game suspended stadium ban following that, and oftentimes we're saying that UEFA don't take a harsh enough action given that night was an absolute disgrace and the referee had to stop the game on 2 occasions. I think taking a knee, even with the fans not there, would be very symbolic from the Republic of Ireland when they play that Nations League game on Thursday. And it will be very interesting to see who Stephen Kenny is going to start. It looks at the moment as if he's going to play with a back 4, but maybe Matt Doherty might just get the nod ahead at right back ahead of the captain Seamus Coleman. What a symbol that might send out for the rest of the debate between Doherty and Coleman if that's the case. And then we'll see what happens with maybe Jason Malumbi starting in the midfield, particularly with James McCarthy carrying that knock. And then we'll see what happens maybe with Aaron Connolly playing off the left. It could be a very youthful front 3 that Ireland play on Thursday. Yeah, really, really looking forward to exactly what the team is. I mean, whether or not we're going to start playing like Brazil in 1970 straight off the bat, I think that maybe by the time the Finland game comes around on Sunday, we should have those expectations, but certainly not for the first game. Give them 90 minutes to bed in, right? Well, look, Stephen Kenny hasn't had any time really with these players, given that the season had to be extended on in England because of the pandemic. He said a very short window to prepare for these 2 matches in the Nations League. And the thing is, Ireland probably need to try and do well in the Nations League if possible. Because this is the nice little backdoor system to get to the next European Championships, which are going to be expanded too. And there's a lot of money on the line. UEFA are making quite a bit of cash available for the winners of these games. And the most bizarre thing, Jerry, I don't know if you saw it last night, that UEFA are now putting a system in place if these Nations League games can't go ahead because of the pandemic. And the old favourite of ours from the World Cup in 1990, the drawing of lots could happen if games can't take place. 1-0 win, 1-0 defeat, or a draw will be in the lots that could be drawn by the teams. Right. Look, it saw us avoid Germany in a World Cup in 1990, so we're pretty good at drawing lots. So maybe that might work out well if we can't play some of these games. But understandably, UEFA are reacting to the situation where some countries might just not be able to host these games over the next while due to COVID-19. Is Latan's coming to Tala? He is, and no one's going to be able to see him. This is like Shamrock Rovers' biggest fixture in Europe, I would say, since they hosted Juventus, and it was packed that night at Tala Stadium in the Europa League. Now at this stage, 8-9 years ago? It's just an awful pity because when it came out and the potential teams were there, Milan was the team that you saw and you went, right, can they draw Milan? If crowds had been allowed, you would have been looking at 50,000 people in the Aviva Stadium for this fixture, and people would have went along just to see the 7-time European champions play against Shamrock Rovers. The windfall's not quite going to be there. You mentioned on the pay-per-view a few moments ago that Milan are likely to broadcast this themselves or to sell it to an Italian broadcaster directly. Shamrock Rovers will have a decision to make. I mean, they streamed the last round where they had their epic victory on penalties themselves, But I would imagine that the TV companies here in Ireland would be extremely keen to try and get AC Milan against Shamrock Rovers onto the TV. So it's a bit of a balancing act there, and probably negotiations for Shamrock Rovers to work out, because TV rights are pretty much the Wild West until you get to the playoff round of the Champions League and the Europa League. Before that, the clubs can negotiate their own deals. So maybe if Shamrock Rovers can get a few quid for that, it might make up for some of the loss that would have been there for the huge financial windfall they could have had if they had a packed Aviva Stadium for the visit of AC Milan.
All right, good stuff, Will. If you want to get in touch, 087 9180 180 is the number. Let's have a look at the OTB Sports app this morning. If you haven't downloaded it already, just search OTB Sports in either of the app stores and you'll get it there. It has our radio station. It has all of our video, including this show live now. If you want to watch us, all our podcasts, the OTB Podcast Network is updated there. So that's upwards of 10 to 15 podcasts a day, 40 different streams over the course of a week. And the best place to get tickets for our forthcoming events is on the events tab at the bottom of the OTB Sports app. Enjoy it. Now, up next, legendary Dundalk racing driver Tommy Byrne sat down for an interview from his home in Ohio with Shane Hannon. The 2016 film Crash and Burn opened up Tommy to a brand new audience with extraordinary stories of life in Formula One, arguments with Ayrton Senna. Who hasn't had arguments with Ayrton Senna in Formula One, it turns out, and nearly getting shot in Mexico. Tommy also spoke about learning the ropes at Mondello Park, the home of Irish racing. Their new website is mondellopark.ie, and you can book individual or group driving experiences. We kick off here with Tommy speaking about the ego of the racing driver. Have a look.
Yeah, I mean, that can be said, but at the same time, I never had any trouble with any of the teams that I won races with or championships with. The only time I would have some trouble is some of the teams that I went to, and they didn't want to win. I mean, anybody who wanted to win they would love to have a Tommy Byrne or Eriksen Senna driving the car. I just knew. I don't know how I knew. I just knew that if something went wrong and I went slow, if I'm doing a certain time one day and then half hour later I'm going half second slower, well, something went wrong, and it wasn't me. So they would obviously I'd say, well, let's take a look at the notes here and see what happened. Something changed. And they would be quick enough to say that, just the driver's having a bad day. Drivers don't change. So lucky enough, I was able to do that. That's how I won my 6 championships. I know drivers that they were put down by the team and they wouldn't fight back. Well, they had no choice. They couldn't fight back. And they didn't win as many races. So, I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing.
That man you mentioned, Ayrton Senna, perhaps one of Formula One's greatest drivers, certainly one of the most well-known drivers, we'll put it that way. In the documentary, you speak about how you would win a race and the following year Senna would come along and it was like he was the second coming of Christ, that he had won the same race as you had, but whereas you would get less plaudits perhaps. And I know you had spoken about how you were perhaps cocky, whereas he was arrogant. Well, what was the difference in those for you?
I joked around a lot. Ayrton Senna put everything into racing. All his life was racing. I mean, he just didn't sleep. He just wasn't a very happy person unless he was winning races. And I, on the other hand, I was still have a good time and have fun and still go out and win races. And so for sure, he deserved everything he got. He worked harder than me. If I had worked that hard, I could have won even more. But I just happened to come a little bit easier to me, and he wasn't very impressed with that because we worked for the same team. So we seen each other every day. But he was famous before he was famous. Yeah. He was famous in Formula Ford 1600. People were talking about him as the second coming of Christ before he even got there because of his aura, his family, where he came from, and his speed. The guy was just super fast.
One quote from Eddie Jordan was, "Forget Schumacher, forget Senna. Tommy Byrne was the best of them all." Some people don't like getting plaudits like that. They find it uncomfortable. Others take it in their stride and accept it and acknowledge that they had a serious talent. Where do you sit with quotes like that and with people saying things like that about you and your career?
Very uncomfortable. For sure. That was something that's obviously people use that, and the book and the DVD and the movie, that's been used a lot. I didn't say that. But all I know is at that time, back in the day, I wasn't afraid of Ayrton Senna.
And you were probably one of the only ones who weren't afraid of Ayrton Senna.
I was looking forward to the day we could race together, but it just never happened. but I didn't go around saying that. It would have been a tough fight for sure.
It's an interesting one, and you mentioned that you were in one of the smaller teams in Formula One. Even to this day, you see the likes of Williams down at the bottom of the grid, and those drivers find it quite tough because if they come out of a race with points, they're doing very well. For you, you had the opportunity to do a test drive for McLaren, and I know Ron Dennis was over McLaren at that point. He had a bit of an edgy relationship with, or maybe no relationship at all, but just a couple of edgy encounters. But what was that like, that test drive? Because by all accounts, you performed extraordinarily well in the McLaren car when you got the chance to try out a proper Formula One car.
No, the McLaren was by far the best car I've ever driven. Remember, I was driving one of the cars that 4 cars used to go home. We didn't qualify, so you didn't get the race at all. And one of the cars was the one I was driving, which was the Theodore. I only got to qualify twice out of 5 times. And those guys, the team manager of the Theodore, his answer was, well, Tommy, you're just not a good enough driver. Keke Rosberg, if he was in your car, he'd be winning the race. And I said, obviously you can imagine how that went down with me. I just lost my mind and told them what I thought. And they didn't want to win up. They didn't want to do any better. So I just said, come and watch drive the McLaren, the real car. And I did get to drive the McLaren. And I did do everything right on that day. And I was very fast. And for some reason, they weren't that impressed, but a lot of people were. The car was so much better. The difference was I would have qualified in the front row of the British Grand Prix, whereas with my other car that I drove Formula One, I would have been last or maybe not even qualified. So that's the difference in a number 1 car in the world and one of the lower cars in the world. So at least I did get, in 2 months, I got to drive the best car in Formula One and the worst car in Formula One. So I did leave Formula One knowing that I could have done the job.
It's an interesting one, and I guess from looking up different drivers' backgrounds, the step from beginnings in race driving to Formula One is remarkably long. But for you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was only a matter of a short number of years between starting off as a race car driver and reaching that pinnacle. When you were running around Dundalk, did you, as a kid, did you ever think that's where you would end up? Did you ever aspire that that's where you would end up?
Most of the time, I just want to be a mechanic, a welder in America, because watching all the John Wayne movies at Christmas time, I just loved America. And that's where I wanted to go. And I instead of going when I was 15, I was a welder mechanic, a diesel mechanic at 15 or 16 years of age. That's where I went after school. And I had a friend who went over there, and he told me about all the gold running down the roads and everything. So I figured, hey, better again. So I was heading for America. I would have went 16, 17 years of age. And that's when I went and I drove that. I went to Modelo Park and drove the school car for the 15 laps, and that changed my whole life. All of a sudden, then now I want to be a race car driver. And then I did get to go to America, 1985. So I was about 10 years later I came over. And started a new career, by the way. I started again in Formula Ford 1600 and got all the way up to Indy Lights and just didn't make it to IndyCar. So I actually had 2 careers.
And the Indy Light stuff as well, and heading to America. I mean, were there ever any regrets? You say you always had the ambition to go to America. Were there ever any regrets that you had maybe gone to America too soon, that maybe you could have pursued the Formula One dream a little longer, as Eddie Jordan says in the documentary, or were you happy enough that this was the life for you and you were enjoying yourself over there?
When I got into Formula One, it wasn't what I expected, obviously, because you're used to winning races, and now you're last, and you get treated completely different. And nobody spoke to me except Nicky Lauda and Nelson Piquet said hello. Everybody else just ignored me. So I wasn't that impressed with Formula One in the first place. And so once it didn't work out, straight away I was heading for America. I said, okay, I'm off. Eddie Jordan convinced me to stay for 1 more year, which I did. And I drove for him in Formula 3 again in Europe. And we were leading that championship, and we ended up finishing 4th. So I did hang on for 1 more year. And Eddie said, that he was obviously going to try to help. At that stage, Eddie there was no test teams at that stage. And we did talk to Ken Tyrrell about driving his Formula One car, and he wanted £1 million. So I stayed for 1 more year. I actually stayed for 2 years. I drove for Gary Anderson in the European Formula 3 Championship. So I went to America probably a little later than I really would have. But I was just glad to get away from it.
You mentioned the cup that only a couple of the Formula One drivers said hello or hi to you. I mean, I'm reminded of different rivalries, and Alex Hurricane Higgins comes to mind as someone who put fear into Steve Davis. And Davis was on record as saying he was afraid of him and his character, and it's just because of his personality and the unpredictability of the Hurricane. Was there an element of that there was maybe people frightened to approach you, that you were this unknown entity from Ireland with a different background to the rest, who went about things differently, that partied and had women and just completely approached driving in a different way?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I didn't make that much effort to talk to them either when I got to Formula One, but I was only in it real briefly for like 5 races, and most of the time I was depressed because I knew my career was over because I wasn't qualifying. I was struggling just to get along with the team. So I really didn't care that much about them, but some of them actually I knew later on. Gerhard Bergman, those guys. I mean, I partied with them in Formula 3 before they got to Formula 1. So I don't know. I just think it was bad timing for me. The whole thing, wrong place, wrong time. The partying and stuff really didn't happen until after the Formula 1. That's when I just didn't give a fuck and just went for it. You know? But before that, it really wasn't that. I was doing just about as good as anybody else when it came to. I was just happy. I was happy-go-lucky, laughing, joking. I could get into a car at the last minute and strap in and go out and beat everybody, and they'd already be sitting meditating for 10 minutes before that. And I knew what I was doing when it came to that. I was screwing with them a little. But it looked like I enjoyed it, like I was having too much fun, but deep down, inside, I still knew I had to win. It was very, very important. So maybe I give the wrong impression sometimes.
One anecdote from I guess the book and the movie and from your life that I guess sums up that difference in approach for Formula One drivers is there's a photo of yourself, I think, and it's Niki Lauda at an awards dinner, and you speak in the movie about how you had enough drugs in you to kill a buffalo. I mean, were those incidents and nights like that and the days thereafter, I guess, ever too much for you? Did you find it tough to kind of get up and motivate yourself after benders like that, or what was the partying like at that stage?
Well, I mean, after that, it was most of the time I went. Well, that was obviously a one-off. That was a one-off. That Niki Lauda thing. Somebody just handed me a bunch of cocaine, and I took it because it basically was all over at that stage. I wasn't getting back to Formula One, so I really didn't care. But nobody knew. Nobody knew what was happening until I told in the book. I told it. Nobody had any idea that I was out of my mind. I took so much of it. I think it might have hurt me to this day. I mean, because it was speed. It wasn't cocaine. So at that stage, it was kind of, I knew it was all over. And then I was just, after that, I just wasn't as serious as I was before that when it came to, I did party. When I went to America is when I probably let my hair down, because then it was done. Then it was for sure. There was no more making fortunes in racing. It was just having, just get by, which I got by. I should have quit 10 years earlier and got a real job.
You had a short stint in Mexico as well, which was quite fascinating to read about, because in Mexico, I guess the money has to come from somewhere for drivers to perform and for money to be pumped into the cars. And I guess in Mexico, maybe you're not quite sure, as you would be in America or in the UK or Ireland, where the money is coming from. Can you tell people maybe who haven't heard the story about, was it Orcho, your friend Orcho, and an incident with him that ultimately led to you leaving Mexico and never going back?
Well, I went down to Mexico. I had no money, and I was married at this stage. I had my kids, and I went down there to sell a helmet. Now, I took my helmet with me, the last helmet I got from Bell, and it was all painted up. It was worth like probably $500. And I went down there. A guy, Alfonso Toledano, took me down there, and introduced me to Orcho. Just a weird, millionaire guy, just he wasn't quite right in the head, and introduced me to him. And yes, there was more guns involved. The very first day I met him, he had a gun out, and I was sitting in the back of the car. I thought he was going to shoot me because I didn't speak Spanish at the time. And he was talking to his buddy, looking at me with his stupid eyes, laughing at me and pointing the gun and just driving down the road. And it turns out all he wanted to do was, after a half hour of terror, which I thought I'm going to be shot in the middle of Mexico and nobody knows where I am, because nobody knew where I was at that stage, my wife, kids and nothing. And half an hour of pointing the gun and talking to Pepe, the guy beside him, back and forth. And I thought, shit, I'm going to get shot in Mexico. Nobody knows where I am. There's no cell phones in those days. And turns out then he looked at me and then looked away and looked at me and took the gun one more time and smiled. And he put the gun out the window of the car, and we're passing some cars. I thought, shit, he's going to shoot the family of people. It's not going to be me that's going to be shot. It's going to be somebody else. And turns out that all he was doing was shooting the signpost when he was going by, the stop sign or whatever. But not speaking the language and listening to them speaking in Spanish, I just thought they're going to shoot me on the side of the road. But so a year or so later, then he kind of became a sponsor and stuff, and he helped the team out, and because he liked me a lot, and so there was like orgies and stuff sometimes. So there was a big orgy going on one day, and the girls came running downstairs to me looking for help from me, and he ran out with his gun naked, and I just wanted to know. Naturally, I just looked up and said, "What's your problem? What are you doing? ¿Qué pasa, amigo?" And he just took the gun. He shot at me twice, and we missed. Obviously, he's a very bad shot, and he missed, and that's when I think that was 1994, and I locked myself in the room with all the girls, and next thing they all escaped at some stage during the night because he was looking for his bullets because I hid all the bullets, and so I got up the next morning, and I just got out of there, and I went to my other team owner, and I told him I need to get out of here because he's going to kill somebody or he's going to kill me or whatever. So that's when I got a job in Mid-Ohio. That was like 25 years ago.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scholesy were out every night, probably night before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
OTB Sports Radio.
Half past 9 this morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. If you've just joined us, you can get us on 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Stephen Doyle is with us. Stephen, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. Morning, Will.
We're going to do Deal or No Deal in about 10 minutes' time. For those people who need their transfer fix, you can sit in judgment on some of the rumours that are out there. But in the meantime, we want to talk a little bit about League of Ireland. It's on-field stuff for now, anyway. Games last night behind closed doors. How did they all go? What was the scenario like?
Yeah, well, as you know, it's been back for several weeks now. I got my first experience actually last week. I was in Hungary with the Bohemians squad for their European match over in Székesfehérvár. So that was my first experience of behind closed door game. But first domestic one was last night. I went to see Bohemians playing the FAI Cup second round against Cabinteely, 2-0 win, and yeah, my first experience of a behind closed door match in the League of Ireland. And it was, look, the club, the FAI, everybody involved, I have to say they're running a brilliant show, absolutely fantastic. We had to fill out the forms, obviously, beforehand to make sure that everything was in order before you can attend the game. The going in, obviously, your temperature taken, plenty of sanitizer there, hand sanitizer to make sure you're clean and all that kind of thing. And the social distancing once you get into the ground then is great. Like they've got all the seats that you're not allowed to sit on are impossible to sit in. Each one that you can sit in is marked. So it was all brilliantly run. But it was bittersweet because, you're getting to see a bit of live football. But, Jerome usually down there at Dalymount Park on Friday nights or whatever other League of Ireland ground. And, Dalymount obviously has this special type of character on a Friday night because you've got 3 bars under the stadium. There's always a great atmosphere there. There's always a bit of crack and slagging and people just enjoying football, and the atmosphere is just it's brilliant on a Friday. It's a great way to spend a Friday night, and you miss all that. It's kind of a little bit sad in a way. But look, the most important thing is that the players are getting to play games. And again, just going back to the football matters, Bohemians would have been obviously disappointed with their defeat in Europe last week. It was an absolutely brilliant performance by the team over 120 minutes to take a club like Fehervar to extra time, a club with millions behind them. They're backed by an oil and gas company. And to take them to a penalty shootout was really incredible. And then the manager, Keith Long, made 9 changes to his starting team for the cup match last night, and they were absolutely superb. They've got a really good academy system going there at Bohemians in tandem with St. Kevin's boys, and they're bringing through some really fabulous young talent. Promise Amacherry, who got on the goal sheet last night, he was excellent. But I would urge everybody, if you can get to watch Bohemians, keep an eye out for a young guy called Dawson Devoy. He made a couple of appearances last season, played in the European game off the bench last week. But last night, my God, this kid was absolutely brilliant. I think he's just 18 still. And he's one of those players, Jared, that it just looks like the ball is glued to his foot. His ball control is absolutely incredible. Up against, he's not the biggest kid you'll ever see.
Where does he play?
Maybe. He plays in the hole, plays like a number 10 role, Jared, but he can go wide, he can go left, he can go right. But this kid is brilliant. I saw one of the Bohemians supporters last night tweeting saying that they'd seen him playing last year in the UEFA Youth League for Bows against Pauk, and he said it was actually quite incredible to see an Irish player that was technically head and shoulders above everybody else in the pitch, including the opposition. This kid is going to go far. I think he's got a real chance of possibly making the under-21 squad in the next couple of years. And Dawson Devoy, I think, is a name we're all going to be talking about in a few years to come.
And are they going to stick him straight in the team now, do you think?
Well, he has been playing some senior games. He started a couple of games since the restart. I think last night they've got a really big game on Saturday against Shamrock Rovers. The Dublin Derby is a big game any time of the year, but this is possibly a title decider with so few games left, and with Bohemians just 2 points behind Rovers. So I think he did his chances really good last night of possibly getting a start in that big game. So yeah, he's going to play a lot more senior matches this year, and he's definitely a huge talent to watch.
Is Keith Long a managerial genius?
I'm sure he would get quite you'd probably go red in the face if you said that to him. I think he's definitely, I think he's a Liverpool fan as far as I know. He's a big Kenny Dalglish fan, and I think he definitely takes a little bit of influence from the kind of the gegenpressing that Jurgen Klopp employs at Liverpool. That's the way Bohemians teams play. They really press teams hard and high up the pitch, and they have a lot of pace in their team as well, which they like to hit teams with on the break when they counter-attack. But the one thing I would draw huge comparisons between Keith Long and Jurgen Klopp is that he can coach players to be better. And sorry, it's not just Keith Long. His assistant Trevor Crowley as well is a brilliant coach, and he's been proven at other League of Ireland clubs as well, Shamrock Rovers, St. Patrick's Athletic. But Keith Long is definitely a manager who coaches players to be better players. And there's players that have gone in there, the likes of Chris Twardek, they signed from Sligo Rovers from last year. He has become a better player, I think. Listen, that's not to put a slide on Sligo Rovers. He was good at Sligo, but I think he's gotten even better this year as well. Andre Wright, a player they signed from the lower leagues in England last year, he played a couple of good games at the end of last season, but he has come on leaps and bounds this year. He's been absolutely fantastic since the restart. So he's definitely, whether he's a managerial genius, I think that remains to be seen. I think he still has to win trophies with
Bohemians. Got to win the league, yeah. That would help.
Yeah.
When's that game? Is that Friday night?
That's Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon, okay. Well, look, we'll talk again about that in advance of that. Let's talk about the Republic of Ireland, because obviously big game in the meantime. Big decisions to be made. A few key decisions still to be made about. I wonder actually if any full final decisions are actually made. Who's going to start at right back? First time out. I don't like criticising. Well, I'm not criticising anybody, but I do think Doherty's going to win the race out of Seamus Coleman. I think, Kenny might look at this on form, and I think Matt Doherty has been playing in the Europa League. He's got European level experience over the last season or so. He's been playing very well with Wolves over the last after the restart of the Premier League, and even before that, across the season. He can get into the box, he can score goals,
create goals, which is something maybe Seamus has lacked a little bit over the last season. He's still getting forward in that, and that's not even to criticise Seamus Coleman. I think maybe sometimes that's the players around him not capitalising on the chance that Seamus creates, but he maybe doesn't do that as much as he would have in the past with Everton. Defensively, I think they're both on a par. I think Seamus Coleman is one of the best and most tenacious defenders right back you'll find in the Premier League. But Matt Doherty has that as well. And I think when you kind of balance out what both players have done over the last 12 months or so, I think Doherty's going to win that race. So I think he will start at right back.
Okay.
Steve, do we assume it is 4 at the back then as opposed to 5? I'm guessing if Stephen Kenny maybe had a few friendlies and a bit more time, he may well have looked at 3 centre-backs and Coleman at the right of a 3. But I'm guessing we do go to pretty typical back 4 for Thursday.
Why do you think that will? Because anytime we bring that up, everybody's like, no, he's never done it. He's never going to do it. Like, why? So do you honestly think that there's a chance that that might be part of our future?
Yeah, I think he'd consider it if he had a bit more time. I remember asking Stephen Kenny about this when he did his first press conference, and he pointed out that there's players who actually fit the system quite well defensively to play with 3 centre-backs and 2 wing-backs, given that Enda Stevens currently plays that way at Sheffield United. Matt Doherty will probably have to change a little bit at Spurs, but at Wolves he was an attacking right wing-back, and you've got typically John Egan playing in a back 3 at Sheffield United. Yeah. You could then easily move Coleman to the right-hand side and put Duffy
it makes sense.
beside them.
But he's never done it. Yeah, did he say he would do it? Like that day, did you get the bang of I can't wait to try this out, or is it like, look, I can do that if I want?
The feeling I got was more I could do that if we can, but I just get the impression that if he'd had, say, the summer friendlies and say if they had longer training camps, I think this is something they would have looked at. I don't know what you think of this one, Steve. I think they're probably going to stick with 4.
Yeah, I think you will. Seamus Coleman has played in that back 3 with Everton a couple of times this season, but not a lot, and not enough that would give me confidence to say that we could go out and play that system now this Thursday. And as you've both alluded to there, he's never done it. He's with Dundalk, he was a back 4. With the under-21s, it was a back 4 as well. So I think he'll stick with that. And as well, I think it gives Matt Doherty more chance Matt Doherty or Seamus Coleman, whoever plays a right back, I think it gives them more room as well to get forward from a back 4 position. If you're a little bit narrower in that immediate midfield area of the pitch in front of them. So we've seen, even this season with Wolves, Matt Doherty's chances to get forward to the byline have been kind of limited because Adama Traore is playing on the right of the attack in the forward 3. So I just think, I think for the time being, I think he will stick with that back 4. And look, the big question is because he would normally play with the defensive midfielders, 2 midfielders, the midfield pivot as they call it, in front of the attacking 3, and it looks like he's going to change that already. He's going to go with 3 midfielders and 3 forwards. So I think it'll be a back 4, I would say, on Thursday night.
Steve, I was just thinking in terms of who plays ahead of either Matt Doherty or Coleman too. Does he go with Robinson on that side and try and keep the width? Because Stephen Kenny oftentimes with the 21s and with Dundalk like to play someone over on the right-hand side who is left-footed and who would cut in like an inside forward. He doesn't have a huge amount of options in terms of doing that. Who do you think is going to play at the front of the 3 on the right-hand side?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, it's funny, I was going through the squad there this morning. I think the players that he has in the squad, I still think a 4-2-3-1 would actually be the better formation. And having James McCarthy and Jason Malumbi as the defensive pairing in front of the back 4, and then playing maybe Harry Arter in the hole, and having then 2 wide attacking players like Callum Robinson, Aaron Conley on each side. So those 2 names I've just mentioned, if he does go in attacking 3, whoever the striker is in the main place, we'll get onto that in a moment. But I think Callum Robinson, he's a player who can play a wide right. He's played it there before for Preston and Sheffield United. And as we know, Aaron Conley plays as that wide left player for Brighton, and for the under-21s under Stephen Kenny, he played wide left in the attacking 3 behind the striker. So I would say Callum Robinson and Aaron Conley as the wide players. Like James McLean can play on both sides as well.
Hang on, sorry, did he play 4-2-3-1 at the under-21s?
Stephen Kenny?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been more so 4-2-3-1, yeah.
All right, so it's not a 4-3-3. So Conley is going to play.
Like the team they were able to, because of the players that they had in there, they were able to, I suppose what you would say, maybe merge into different formations during the game. But generally it was Adam Ida as the main striker, with Aaron Conley, Troy Parrott and whoever was wide right, and then having Jason Malumbi and Conor Coventry as the two players then in front of the back four.
Right. Not a million miles away from, I think, what the team is actually going to be. So in your head, is it, when he names the team, will the two midfielders actually be... So let's assume James McCarthy is fit for the moment. We don't know. He was training yesterday. Hodgson said he's not. Ireland might go, screw you, Hodgson. It's our team. He's our player. He wants to play for us. What are you going to do? Shoot me. There might be a little bit of that. Who knows? Let's say he starts. You think Malumbi is going to start alongside him, and that is a 4-2-3-1 then?
Well, it would be, but everything I'm hearing, I haven't been out with the squad now yet so far this week, but everything I'm hearing from what Kenny is saying, it sounds like he's going to go with three in the middle, with three in the front line. So, that would suggest to me that James McCarthy's going to, because he keeps saying James McCarthy is a better midfielder when he plays in the centre with a couple of players either side of him.
Yeah.
So that seems to be where Kenny wants to go. So I would suggest then there's possibly McCarthy with Malumbi and Harry Arthur on either side. Personally, I just think there would be better balance in the team if you have Malumbi and McCarthy playing together as a midfield too, and then playing Harry Arthur in the hole behind the strikers. That can still happen if you play in a 4-3-3. So I still think you're going to have the same players. It's just, which way does Kenny want them?
Are we splitting hairs, or is it actually fundamentally different?
I think we are splitting hairs, Jared, to be honest. I think Malumbi and McCarthy they're not going to get forward too much. Well, Malumbi might be, if he's playing alongside McCarthy on the right side, he might be given a little bit more license to get forward. But the one thing Malumbi is really good at as well, and he's got the same quality as McCarthy, is spraying passes left to right, switching play, that kind of thing. So that's something that could help us.
Okay, so your midfield three, for the avoidance of all doubt, is going to be McCarthy, assuming he's fit, Malumbi and Harry Arthur.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the thing with McCarthy is it does sound like it's a heavy bruising that he got. So that doesn't sound to me like a player who's going to be ruled out of a game with a really serious injury. And he did train yesterday as well. So if this injury was in any way serious for him not to play, I don't think he'd be training. And it doesn't sound too serious that, it's, as I said, heavy bruising. So, yeah, I think Arthur, Malumbi and McCarthy are the three midfielders he'll go with.
And front three?
Well, as I said, I do think Robinson and Conley are the best options there. James McLean, I wouldn't rule out entirely because it depends, what way does he want to go out against Bulgaria? Look, Kenny isn't the type of manager to go out to, I referenced that Bohemians game last week. Keith Long sent out his team to not concede too many goals in that first half. Wanted to try and get to half-time, maybe 0-0 or with a 1-0 lead. I don't think Kenny's that type of manager. I think he likes to go out and attack teams from the start and try and build a decent lead by half-time. So if possible, he can get in front. So I don't think he's going to be cautious. Now, if he was going to be cautious, he might start James McLean because, as we know, McLean has played both left back and also as a left winger for Stoke City last season, and as a left winger where he would get back and help out in defence. I don't know if you saw these Stoke games, but I've seen them a few times last season, and McLean was very much a defensive left winger. But I think Kenny will want to start Aaron Conley and to perhaps get him to attack the Bulgarian fullbacks and centre halves and get into the box. So I think he will go with Conley. Robinson, I think, is his best option on the right. Of course, he could play Robbie Brady there, Jeff Hendrick.
And who?
There are possibilities as well. But I think the lead striker, Jared, I think is what you're looking for. I think he's going to go with Adam Ida. I do think he'll go with Adam Ida. And I know he only played a few minutes here and there against or for Norwich City in the Premier League after the restart, but it was crucial he got Premier League experience. He banged in that hat-trick against Preston back in January in the FA Cup. So we know he can score goals. He's got over 1 every 2 match ratio for underage teams in Ireland. I think it's 34 and 61 matches or something like that. So he's big, he's strong, he can score goals, he's technically very good, he can hold up the ball, he can play with his back to goal, he can bring the wingers into play, and I think he's got every single quality a lot of qualities that some of the Irish strikers don't have. Shane Long's got pace. He's a brilliant pacey player, but I don't think he can definitely hold up the play, but I don't think he's got the finishing attributes that Adam Ida has got.
Well, we'll see. And Long and McLean, not bad subs to have if you do need a cavalry charge at some point in the second half as well. Okay, 9:47 this morning. Time for Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Time for today's Deal or No Deal. We're starting with Donny van de Beek. That's the correct pronunciation as reported by Phil yesterday. He is reported to have completed his Manchester United medical ahead of his £40 million move. Stephen, is he exactly the kind of player Manchester United need right now?
Is he? Not necessarily, because they got Bruno Fernandes there and they got Paul Pogba there. But I just think for the price that they've got him for, €40 million, I think the final price was, this is an absolute steal. He's only 23 years of age. When you compare him to the likes of, they let go of De Ligt and De Jong, they Ajax got over 60 million quid for those two players. So I think for the price that they got him for, there was a good piece in the Athletic this morning just about how the whole deal went through. Now, I suppose the concern for United fans might be is that he had his heart set on a move to Real Madrid. But the problem seems to have been that Real Madrid are just broken. They can't really afford to be splashing cash on players during this transfer window. So I think the deal that they've struck here is a brilliant deal. The other thing about Van de Beek is he perhaps gives them that midfield goal-scoring option that they're lacking a little bit. Paul Pogba, a lot of his goals over the last season or so were penalties, but he hasn't really contributed a huge amount of goals from play. And this is something Van de Beek is really good at, or Van de Beek, I should say. He's been compared to the likes of Scholes, Lampard, that kind of midfield player. And if you kind of watch some of his games last season in the Champions League, and that's where most people who followed Premier League would have seen him against the likes of Tottenham. He just has this really good knack of picking up brilliant positions in the box. He's able to ghost in behind defenders unmarked and pick up brilliant positions to strike from. And this is something maybe United are lacking. Fernandes maybe is a player who's more so plays outside the box and likes to bring in other players. But Van de Beek he's box to box, and as well as that, he's very good. He can play as a deep lying midfielder as well. He can play as a the so-called number 6. He's well able to tackle. He's well able to pass as well. So I think this is an absolute bargain. I would be one to criticise Manchester United, Ed Woodward, and whoever they have negotiating deals. And the fact that they've done this deal pretty quick and without too much fuss, and it hasn't turned into a saga, I think they have to be credited for that.
Look, maybe they're learning. Who knows? Maybe they're learning. Although Jadon Sancho would suggest they haven't learned that much. Manchester United are also targeting RB Leipzig's French defender, Dayot Upamecano, who's just 21. What kind of impact is he going to make?
I think he will be a good signing for United, but I don't think he's the finished article just yet. He's just 21 years of age, and I know everybody was kind of maybe getting carried away a little bit with his performance against Atletico Madrid and Tottenham in the Champions League, and he was excellent. Like in some of those games, he just looked like a Rolls Royce of a defender. Maybe shades of Virgil van Dijk and maybe Rio Ferdinand at their best. This good tackling, a good stopper in the box. Excuse me, but he's well able to dribble with the ball, find the pass. He gets forward. He can get up to the halfway line and start attacks. The one thing I would say is, though, against Paris Saint-Germain, maybe he showed some weaknesses that, United, they're talking about bringing him in because he's got pace, and because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wants to play a high press. And if he wants to play a high press, he needs a pacey centre-half, which he doesn't have in Lindelof and Maguire. So this is why they're talking about bringing Upamecano in. Now, the problem with Upamecano is that he played against Paris Saint-Germain, who had a good, fast attack, pacey attack, and he did get caught out a few times. So I think there's question marks over him. I'm not getting carried away with him yet over a couple of good performances in the Champions League. And, United are going to have to shell out for him because he signed a new contract.
Yeah, so...
he signed So the new contract basically has a new clause in that next season, if 50 million comes in for him, that they have to sell the player. So it means if they want to prize him away this season, they're going to have to pay upwards of €60 million. And with the financial situation United are in, I really don't think they're going to fork that out for a centre half when they've got what they regard as two good centre halves. But as well, Ger, I think they need experience at the back. I still think
Harry Maguire is pretty experienced. Like, you spend 80 million on the defender, you expect him to tick a lot of boxes.
Yeah, well, they were absolutely. I think they were swindled by Leicester City. It was a ridiculous price to pay for Harry Maguire. I know he's an England international, but he's not worth 80 million. He was never worth 80 million. He was worth 40 at best. And he's just not as good a defender as he's rated by everybody in England.
Well, okay, so in that case, you have to spend the money now to fix that scenario. And
sorry, Jerry, can I just say, we have to bear in mind, what mental state is Harry Maguire going to be in over the next few months after the trouble he's been over the last couple of weeks? So, there's question marks over Harry Maguire. And you were saying, who do they go for?
No, get it with Meccano now. Like, this is Manchester United's problem. They identify a player, they fanny around for 3 transfer windows, and eventually they get him. And they get him late in that transfer window, and he takes 3 months to settle in, and they're like, well, this didn't work very well, did it? It took a little bit longer. And you're like, okay, get Jadon Sancho at the start of the transfer window, do the deal, that's the price, everybody moves on, great. Now it has become public to the point where Leipzig yesterday are tweeting, in case you missed it, he signed a new contract until 2023. It's like, it's the exact counter-argument to the point that you're making about how well they did with the Van de Beek situation, right? Well done, fair enough, but that one obviously fell into your lap because a deal was nearly done with Real Madrid and all of a sudden he becomes available and you're like, okay, bargain, I'll take that. Fair enough, great decision. But with this, if you legitimately think you need pace to change how your team defends, think of the transformational impact that Virgil had on Liverpool. Like, they have to do it. No matter what the fee is, do it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But as I said, look, listen, he could be the perfect player. He could be the player that they need. He does have pace. He should be okay in those situations. But I'm just saying there are some question marks from what I saw in the Paris Saint-Germain game. He played against Tottenham and Atletico Madrid. Like, they're not exactly, they don't exactly have much pace up front. He was up against an old grizzled Diego Costa, and a Harry Kane player is not as mobile maybe as he would have been in the past. So I just wouldn't be getting carried away with a couple of good performances. I know he's played well in the Bundesliga this season. I'm not writing him off totally, but I just think there's question marks over him.
Okay.
If you're going to pay out 60 million quid, don't make the same mistakes that you did with Harry Maguire and Lindelof. Make sure that he is the complete defender that you need for now.
Give me a legitimacy rating. Do you think he will be a Manchester United player at the end of this transfer window? Out of 10?
Out of 10, I'll say 3.
Okay, so you don't. Fair enough. It could be, I say could advisedly, be a pivotal day in the Messi transfer saga. The Messi transfer saga. Lionel Messi will leave Barcelona this summer and is likely to move to Manchester City, according to presidential candidate Tony Freja, according to Goal. Barcelona believe the only way that he can legally leave for free is if he commits to not playing any football. Take a year out at 33. That's according to ESPN. And Lionel Messi's father, Jorge, will meet under fire Barcelona president Josep Bartomeu today to discuss the situation, but an amicable resolution is now believed to be unlikely. This is headed for court. Can Bartomeu save his legacy and smooth this all over, Stephen?
Take a year out. Was he going to go backpacking around the world? Maybe do a bit of hostel hopping?
Can't go anywhere.
He's still like 33.
He'll have to quarantine everywhere he gets for 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Listen, it's just, who's telling the truth there, Ger? Because I'm just hearing different things from different people who all got their own different little agendas. I just think at this stage, like, if Barcelona are going to make any losses out of this situation, maybe they just need to cut those losses at this stage. Everyone's had a good time over the last 15, 20 years while Messi's been playing for them. And I just don't think. What's the price? Well, listen, whatever they can get out of Manchester City now. There seems to be Manchester City are going to have to move a few pieces around to make sure they stay within the FFP rules. Well, FFP, what does that mean to Man City? I don't think that really makes much difference, and they have a little bit of wriggle room there in the sense that they can definitely make this work financially. But these astronomical fees of 600 million, 700 million euro transfer fees, I just think are ridiculous. Maybe they'll pay 200-300 million to Barca.
I reckon Steve-O, he'll go somewhere for around 230, around the kind of Neymar money.
Yeah.
Symbolically, just to make him the most expensive player ever. But I can't see Barcelona wrestling any more money than that. They have no bargaining position here at all, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I said, even I know La Liga got involved on Sunday. I don't know why they thought they would have any impact on this situation. Like, they're in charge of governing the Spanish top flight. The transfers or closing contracts really have nothing to do with them.
They're afraid of losing their biggest player.
Yeah, well, like all the different voices out of Barcelona, as I said, they've all got their own little agendas. I think Messi's dad just needs to sit down with the club and try and thrash out and move out of there.
This is the price.
The other thing as well is the other thing about Lionel Messi is that he's a bit of a homebird from what I've read about him over the last few years. And you know, Barcelona. I've been to Barcelona quite a lot, Ger, over the years, and it's a lovely city, one of my favourite cities in Europe. And he's going to be moving from there to possibly the northwest of England up to Manchester, where it rains every single day of the year.
Didn't Pedro live in Spain and play for Chelsea?
He did. There was a bit of commuting going on there, but I don't know if Messi's going to be allowed to do that. Pep Guardiola is a bit of a ball breaker, isn't he? I think he'd want all his players living in the city. That's where Pep's live. Maybe he'll move in with Pep's family. They've got a lovely apartment there in the city centre of Manchester. Maybe they could have him as a lodger. But they can arrange some sort of a lodging fee there.
10 out of 10 he's going to City? Anywhere else?
I think City's most likely. I'll go 8 out of 10 for this one, Ger.
Okay, rapid fire. We've got 1 minute left for this. Thiago is the only significant Liverpool link. Are they sleeping while Lampard raises an army and City steal Messi?
Listen, I'm just interested to see how Lampard's going to get this team to gel together. A lot of new signings. It might work, but I think he's got a big job in his hands. I looked through the Liverpool squad there this morning before I came on. I think they're pretty strong in all positions, Jared. Goalkeeper, across the back four, midfield. They could maybe do with an extra somebody up front. But I think he's got a couple of young players there that he gave a lot of experience to in the Premier League and the Cup last season. I think he's happy enough to have them as backup.
Okay.
And James Milner's still going strong. So, yeah, I think Liverpool are okay.
Inter looking to offload Denmark midfielder Christian Eriksen 8 months after signing him from Spurs. Turns out his dip in form might have been the cliff. At a reduced rate, could he perhaps represent a little bit of good business for some Premier League club?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if Christian Eriksen can get motivated, get into a team maybe you are going to compete for honours. Listen, maybe Arsenal wouldn't be such a bad move. I know they're looking to bring Dani Ceballos back in, who would be a similar type player. But if you're looking for experience and a player maybe who can help you win trophies, maybe Arsenal could do worse than signing Eriksen.
Steve-O, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us today. Will, thank you as well. That is the end of Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
That's pretty much all your lot today on OTB AM. We'll be covering all the breaking stories over on the OTB Sports app or on otbsports.com. If you want to get in touch with us, you can get us on 0879 180 180. It's a WhatsApp number, so it's there all day for you. We are closing in on 100,000 subscribers over on our YouTube channel, so if you get over there and hit the subscribe button, apparently they send us this nice little silver trophy when we make it. So anyway, we're back on air tonight from 7 o'clock on the radio with Off the Ball. See you then. Best of luck.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.